Orpheus, the king of Ostrom, solemnly swears an oath to take Widia Edilexoni Zeals as his wife for life. He pledges to love her as long as he draws breath, describing her with a mix of reverence and intensity. Standing before the royal couple, the officiant announces the moment for the king to bestow the oath kiss upon his queen. Behind her calm facade, the new queen realizes with a cold chill that the king is actively deceiving her. The king leans in and seals their union with a formal kiss, masking the complex political tensions beneath the surface. In the aftermath, a companion asks the king for his true first impression of the Princess of Zeals. Orpheus remains silent, his sharp gaze hinting at a deeper, more calculated agenda regarding his new bride. He dismisses her beauty as a mere act, labeling her a calm and obedient puppet in his political game. Gario mocks the white rose of Zeals, noting her reputation for extreme pride and queenly behavior in her own land. Vias sternly warns Gario to watch his tongue, reminding him that the princess is now the king's wife. Gario brushes off the tension, reminding Vias that despite the new titles, they remain childhood friends. The atmosphere grows heavy as the men conclude they must remain extremely cautious of the new queen. History looms large, recalling how Ostrom's former king defended the border against the kingdom of Fissiu last year. While the king was away, the kingdom of Zeals seized the opportunity to advance its army toward Ostrom's borders. Orpheus, overseeing the capital at the time, successfully led the defense and drove back the Zeals invaders. Tragedy struck upon the king's return from the front lines when he suddenly fell ill and passed away. The sudden death of the monarch cast a dark shadow over the victory, leaving the kingdom in unexpected mourning. Orpheus reflects on his father's passing, noting how they had only just managed to repel the forces of Zeals and Fissiu. His advisors suggest the marriage will be good news for the people and something the late king would have celebrated. To the queen, however, this marriage is a hollow sham driven entirely by a desire for cold revenge. Months earlier in the kingdom of Zeals, the castle echoed with the sounds of verbal abuse and harsh reprimands. The palace maids stand paralyzed in fear as a princess's fury radiates through the royal dressing room. A trembling maid begs for forgiveness from Princess Widia, the elder sister of the mistreated idol. Idol stands in silence, her vacant eyes reflecting the long-term psychological toll of her sister's cruelty. The younger princess remains a statue of endurance, absorbing the insults without a single word of protest. Terrified by the looming punishment, the maid frantically confirms her understanding of the princess's demands. Widia berates Idol for having no talent and orders her to redo her tasks from the very beginning. As Idol attempts to withdraw, Widia sharply demands to know who gave her permission to leave. Widia forbids Idol from eating until her chores are finished, adding a long list of jewels to polish and dresses to fix. She cruelly reminds Idol that she is only allowed to live in the palace out of pity because her mother was a maid. Idol clenches her skirt in silent agony, whispering a submissive response to her sister's hateful words. Left alone in the room, the young girl sits in a hollow silence, surrounded by the luxury she is not allowed to enjoy. Her physical exhaustion manifests as her stomach growls loudly, a reminder of her forced deprivation. Starving and weak, Idol remembers that her only meal that day was a meager portion of weak porridge. A sudden knock at the door startles her, breaking her momentary lapse into self-pity. Lady Barnet enters the room with a judgmental sneer, immediately targeting the vulnerable young girl. The woman accuses Idol of having a terrible reputation like her mother and scolds her for touching Widia's belongings. Idol tries to defend herself, but Lady Barnet cuts her off, refusing to hear any excuses from the pity princess. Barnet grumbles about Idol being a burden, questioning why anyone should treat a girl like her as royalty. In a fit of rage, the woman screams at Idol to keep her filthy hands off her sister's things. The verbal assault turns physical as the environment becomes increasingly hostile for the young princess. The tension reaches a breaking point as Idol is pushed to the floor in a display of raw malice. Gasping in pain, the girl can only offer an apology for a crime she did not commit. A necklace is snatched away with violent force, scattering beads across the cold palace floor. Idol cries out as a heavy heel is ground into her hand, pinning her to the ground in a humiliating display. Lady Barnet looms over her, mockingly asking if she understood the simple instruction to stay away. The cruel woman continues to apply pressure, relishing the opportunity to inflict pain on the defenseless girl. Barnet laughs, telling Idol to taste a bit of the suffering she believes the true queen endures. The assault is interrupted by a voice announcing that the queen is calling for Lady Barnet's presence. Sir Yaowen appears in the doorway, sternly ordering the woman to go to the queen immediately. Panicked, Barnet scurries away, leaving Yawen alone with the broken and trembling Princess Idol. The knight approaches the fallen girl with genuine concern, asking if she is all right after the brutal encounter. Idol tries to apologize for the scene, but Yawen insists that he should be the one sorry for not helping sooner. Ashamed of her situation, Idol struggles to look at the man who just witnessed her total humiliation. Yawen gently takes her hand, insisting that her wounds must be treated quickly before they worsen. Idol is overwhelmed by the kindness of a high-ranking knight who serves her brother, the king. He stays by her side, providing a rare moment of safety and human connection in her isolated life. Yawen's gaze is soft and focused, treating the outcast princess with a dignity she has never known. Idol recalls how she was beaten for crying and starved for missing her mother in the past. She explains that she learned to endure by remaining as unmoving as a rock until her tormentors grew bored. This icy stoicism was the only survival mechanism she possessed in the hostile environment of the Zeal's court. Yawen tells her to call for him if anything happens, offering his protection against her abusers. With a sudden, warm smile, the knight surprises her by presenting a hidden gift. He reveals a pile of sweets, a small but profound gesture of comfort for the starving girl. Idol is speechless with joy, her dark world momentarily brightened by the knight's unexpected compassion. A sudden, beastly growl erupts, signaling a primal shift in the atmosphere. Whittia's younger sister, Idol, expresses profound gratitude after being secretly gifted a treat to compensate for her missed lunch. With a hauntingly calm expression, the Crown Prince commands Idol to remember his unwavering, watchful concern for her. A lingering focus on Princess Idol emphasizes her precarious position within the royal hierarchy. The royal family gathers for a silent, tension-filled dinner under the glow of candelabras. Idol's eyes widen in shock as the heavy atmosphere of the meal begins to suffocate her. The king maintains a stern, closed-eyed composure while focused on his meal. Idol continues to eat in silence, the clinking of cutlery the only sound in the room. Idol reflects on the rarity of this proper meal, noting it is her first in quite some time. In a rare moment of family interaction, Idol expresses her surprise at dining with her father after a month-long absence. Whittia interjects with a boastful laugh, complaining about the knights who organized a tea party and dubbed her the White Rose of Zeals. The Crown Prince coldly dismantles Whittia's vanity, citing rumors that describe her as an arrogant woman who hoards the praise of handsome men. Whittia reacts with indignant fury, struggling to maintain her facade of innocence against her brother's sharp accusations. The king's expression darkens into a grimace of pure irritation as the siblings' bickering escalates. The prince continues his verbal assault, mentioning Yawen as the one closest to Whittia's heart while mocking the army's strongest soldier. The king slams his hands onto the table, the sudden violence of the gesture silencing the room instantly. A heavy, suffocating silence falls over the family as they tremble under the king's localized wrath. With chilling finality, the king looks directly at Whittia and announces that her marriage has been decided. The pronouncement leaves both sisters in a state of absolute, wordless bewilderment. A panicked Whittia stammers in disbelief, demanding to know the identity of her intended husband. Whittia's face pales as the reality of her father's decree begins to sink in. The king reveals the groom's identity, the formidable and feared Black Wolf King of Ostrom. Whittia recoils in horror, insulting the neighboring country as a place without culture and labeling its ruler a mere barbarian. Whittia's shock turns into a frantic, sweating panic at the thought of leaving her pampered life. The king directs Whittia's complaints toward the crown prince, shifting the blame for this political nightmare. The king explains that the marriage is compensation for the prince's unauthorized military failure and the resulting war fines. The prince stutters in fear, unable to defend his actions as Whittia glares at him in betrayal. The prince breaks down into a state of incoherent distress as the weight of his failure crushes him. Whittia screams at her brother, blaming his loss on the battlefield for the destruction of her future. The Queen Mother watches the chaos unfold, her own frustration simmering just beneath the surface. The Queen Mother laments the thought of her beautiful daughter being handed over to filthy herdsmen, calling the situation unbearable. The king shuts down the protest, stating firmly that the ministers have already approved the settled matter. The Queen Mother seethes in silence, outraged that such a monumental decision was made without her consultation. The king terminates the discussion with a cold command, leaving his family trembling in his wake. A wicked, calculating smile spreads across Whittia's face as she concocts a desperate plan to save herself. Widya points a finger at her sister and asks the unthinkable. Why not send Idol in her place? Widya argues that since the treaty didn't specify a name, Idol can satisfy Ostrom's demand for a white rose of zeals. Idol stares in frozen horror as her own sister offers her up as a human sacrifice to the barbarian king. Widya presses her father for approval, her eyes gleaming with predatory hope. The king remains silent, his stern features unreadable as he considers the cruel proposal. Idol's spirit shatters as she realizes no one in her family will step forward to protect her. The king agrees to the swap, declaring that as long as a princess of Zeals is sent, he does not care which daughter it is. Idol stands alone by her window, reeling from the realization that she is being exiled to a foreign land. Despite the fear, Idol finds a spark of hope, realizing any place would be better than this hateful household. Staring through the bars of her life, Idol resolves that this forced marriage will finally be her path to freedom. Widya erupts in another fit of rage, discovering that fine fabric meant for her is being used for Idol's wedding outfit. Attendants remind Widya that Idol represents the nation's reputation, despite her lower status as a concubine's daughter. Widya mocks Idol's lineage, treating her sister's upcoming departure with nothing but spiteful contempt. In a fit of petty malice, Widya physically assaults Idol, tearing at her clothing in a jealous frenzy. Widya sneers that Idol won't need luxury in a low-culture country like Ostrom, stripping her of her dignity. The Queen Mother enters the room, demanding to know the cause of the commotion. The Queen stands flanked by attendants, her presence commanding immediate order among her warring daughters. Widya plays the victim, crying to her mother about the horrible girl taking her fabric. The Queen Mother reassures Widya that she has escaped the fangs of the Black Wolf King, while promising her new fabric. The Queen orders everyone out of the room, intending to deal with Idol in a private, ominous encounter. The door shuts with a final, echoing thud, sealing Idol's fate with the woman who loathes her. An attendant bows and exits, leaving the young princess completely defenseless. Idol trembles as her mother approaches, the air thick with impending cruelty. The Queen reaches out, her hand a symbol of the domestic tyranny Idol has endured for years. Metadata and external links indicate the digital origin of this tragic narrative. The Queen Mother whispers with venomous hatred, mockingly calling Idol a queen while admitting her desire to kill her. Idol gasps in pain and fear as the Queen Mother's grip tightens around her face. The Queen's heart seethes with rage because she cannot personally execute Idol, finding the girl's survival enraging. The Queen delivers a final, violent strike, punctuating her long-standing abuse. Idol collapses with a pained grunt, the tears falling as she endures the final cruelty of her home. The Queen confronts her husband, the king, with the bitter truth of his audacity in laying hands on her maid while she was pregnant. He abandoned his wife and baby Widya to visit that woman constantly in a separate chamber. Consumed by a haunting gaze, she demands to know if the humiliation and disgrace of his betrayal are understood. A sudden, violent strike sends a young woman reeling to the ground as a figure looms over her in the shadows. Prostrate and weeping, the victim endures the physical and emotional weight of the assault. Clinging to hope through her tears, she resolves to endure a little longer until she can finally escape this place. Stunned by the realization of such profound malice, she reflects on the murderous hatred she never knew existed against her. Wearing a chilling smile, the king's wife presents a humble wedding gift intended for the journey to Ostrom. With a dark, knowing look, she commands someone to enter as a subordinate acknowledges her lady. Terror grips the young woman as her eyes widen in shock at the figure appearing before her. The formidable Lady Barnet stands tall in the doorway, her presence radiating cold authority. A bell tolls heavily above the castle, signaling the beginning of chapter, the fake queen. The grand ballroom glows under massive chandeliers as the elite gather for a royal occasion. Guests marvel at the white rose of Zeals, whispering about her rumored silver hair during the wonderful wedding celebration. Observers are entranced by her fairy-like appearance, noting that even her eyes shimmer like purple crystals. Skeptical voices mock her frail frame, questioning if such a childlike girl can truly serve as a wife to King Orcius. A sharp, silent gaze cuts through the crowd, observing the young bride with intense scrutiny. The weight of the moment settles over the room as the narrative pauses on a focused, singular point. Overwhelmed by the pressure and the stares, the girl breaks into a cold sweat, her breath hitching in her throat. Tension peaks as a stern face leans in close, causing her to flinch back in visible distress. Her vision blurs with fear, the feeling of being trapped and controlled closing in on her. A heavy boot steps forward with a deliberate thud, emphasizing the power dynamic in the room. She stares down in silence, her expression a mask of growing dread and exhaustion. A steady hand grips a silver knife, preparing to cut into the meal served at the high table. King Orcius breaks the silence, asking with a piercing look if the food of Ostrom does not suit her. Lady Barnet interjects with a condescending laugh, claiming the little lady lived simply and dislikes meat. She arrogantly declares that barley soup and bread are enough, insisting her meals remain under her strict supervision. The king shuts her down instantly, asserting that she is his wife and must be addressed as Her Majesty the Queen. He commands that she will eat meat, fish, and everything she needs, forcing a submissive apology from the stunned Lady Barnet. Lady Barnet's face pales as she absorbs the king's unexpected and public defense of his new bride. Glaring with absolute authority, the king tells her to think carefully about what his marriage means and act accordingly. The air turns frigid as Lady Barnet seethes internally over the king's insolent correction. The king turns his back on the table, leaving the two women in the wake of his commanding exit. The young queen remains frozen, her wide eyes reflecting the shock of the confrontation. A sudden movement breaks the stillness as the servants prepare for the next phase of the evening. Maidservants usher the queen away, informing her they will take her to the king after she finishes changing. Lady Barnet watches them go, a thin, venomous smile returning to her aged features. Alone and trembling, the queen laments that in the end, she was too distressed to eat anything at all. A sharp sound startles her, her eyes snapping toward the source of the interruption. Lady Barnet mocks her pale complexion, suggesting she must be nervous about what is coming next. A close-up reveals the malicious curve of the older woman's lips as she prepares to strike with words. She cruelly suggests that as the daughter of a thieving cat, pleasing the barbarian king should come naturally to her. The queen's eyes fill with tears of outrage and hurt at the vicious insult to her mother. Standing before the bridal chamber doors, she realizes she must now face the bridal night in her sister's place. She despairs that Lady Barnet was sent specifically to torment her, the only person here who knows her true identity. Leaning against the wall, she is crushed by the weight of her lonely and terrifying situation. Despite sacrificing herself as a substitute, she fears she has failed to escape her days of suffering. A voice breaks her reverie as the king asks if he is so despised that she would look this sad. She gasps in surprise, her eyes flying open as she realizes the king has been watching her. He approaches her, noting that at least she didn't run away, which he deems worth praising. He asks if her country rumors that his land is a land of barbarians, his presence looming over her. He reminds her that from this day forward, she is his wife, regardless of her fears. The air grows heavy with the king's intensity as he addresses her hidden hatred. With a blade held close, he threatens to cut off her head without hesitation if she tries anything. Their eyes lock in a moment of terrifying intimacy, one filled with threat and the other with pure shock. He turns away, his cape swishing as the tension in the room remains at a breaking point. Left alone and breathless, she can only utter a confused, "Huh," as the king's behavior shifts again. A sudden cry erupts as she is swept off her feet in an unexpected movement. She struggles to understand this man and why he acts with such unpredictable intensity. Caught in his arms, she is thrown into a state of total panic and confusion. He looks down at her with a piercing gaze, asking point-blank if she is afraid of him. She stammers a denial, her face flushing as she tries to find her voice in his grasp. She tries to explain that it is only because it is her first time, her heart racing. The king stares at her, his expression unreadable as she trails off in embarrassment. A final, lingering look passes between them, the night only just beginning. Widia wakes up in a fluster on the royal bed, startled to find Emperor Orcius looming over her in an intimate position. Before she can process the situation, Orcius leans in close and captures her lips in a sudden, breathless kiss. The emperor pulls back, looking down at the dazed princess with a cold, unreadable expression. He lingers over her, his presence heavy and suffocating as the morning light begins to filter into the room. Widia is struck by how forcefully he is acting compared to his distant behavior on their wedding day. Looking into his eyes, she recalls the deceptive gentleness he showed when he first reached out to her. Despite the intensity of his gaze, she tries to steady her breathing and convinces herself that she is not afraid. Orcius remains silent and shirtless, his intense gaze fixed on her as the clock ticks away in the quiet room. He observes her closely, noting her silent reaction as she lies still beneath him. Internally, The emperor notes with a sense of grim satisfaction that she did not try to refuse him. He reaches out and runs his fingers through her long hair, his touch possessing a lingering, possessive quality. Whittier stares back at him with wide, trembling eyes, completely overwhelmed by the proximity of his bare chest. Shock washes over her as she lets out a small, stifled cry of surprise at the realization of their situation. Panicked and blushing, she begins to stammer out an apology for taking up the emperor's bed. Orcus cuts her off calmly, informing her that she was sleeping so deeply he didn't want to wake her. He notes that her face is still deathly pale and firmly commands her to go back to sleep. Without waiting for a response, the emperor begins to dress himself as Whittier watches him in stunned silence. He informs her that he will have breakfast brought to the room and brook no objections regarding her health. Orcus tosses the covers back over her head, signaling the end of the conversation as he prepares to depart. Whittier is left alone under the blankets, her heart racing as she tries to make sense of his sudden care. She peeks out from the sheets, her eyes wide as she reflects on the confusing warmth of his actions. As the door shuts behind him, she remains frozen in place, whispering to herself that he was actually gentle. Outside the room, a maid named Barnet waits to check on the lady's well-being. Whittier flinches at the sound of the voice, her mind still reeling from the emperor's departure. Orcus walks down the palace corridor, his expression hardening back into its usual royal mask. His boots click sharply against the stone floor as he moves with purposeful, predatory grace. He pauses for a moment, his thoughts drifting back to the woman he just left in his chambers. The emperor questions if she is truly the same arrogant princess he had heard about from Zeals. He continues walking, sensing that something is fundamentally different about her than the rumors suggested. An advisor approaches the emperor, addressing him formally as Majesty Orcus to gain his attention. The official, a man named Vius, adjusts his glasses and states that he has urgent information to share. The scene shifts abruptly as the sound of a splashing impact echoes through the room. A cruel woman stands over Whittier, drenching the shivering princess with a pitcher of freezing water. The assailant screams that Whittier is the daughter of a wicked woman and accuses her of seducing men. She continues her tirade, calling Whittier lower than low, and pointing at the red marks on her skin with disgust. Repeatedly calling her disgusting, the woman rages about Whittier's mother stealing the queen's husband. Drenched and humiliated, Whittier trembles violently as the icy water soaks through her thin nightgown. She clutches her chest in agony, feeling as though her very heart is freezing under the weight of the abuse. Whittier curls into a ball and covers her ears, resolving to turn her heart into stone to survive this nightmare. She repeats the mantra to herself that it's okay, desperately clinging to the hope of being freed one day. A memory of a gentler voice calling her idle and wishing her good night flashes through her mind. The cold reality of her current life snaps back into focus, leaving her gasping for breath in the dark. Whittier stands alone in a cavernous, dimly lit hall, looking small and fragile in her damp clothing. Her bare feet pad softly across the cold floor as she tries to find a way back to her solitude. She slowly pushes open a large set of double doors, hoping to find warmth inside the room. Shivering, she tells herself she needs to warm her body up immediately before she collapses. As she enters, she is shocked to find the emperor already waiting for her in the shadows. Whittier stammers in surprise, demanding to know why he has returned to the room so soon. Orcus notes with a frown that she hasn't touched the breakfast he specifically prepared for her. She bows her head in a panic, apologizing and explaining that Lady Barnet took her outside. The emperor steps closer, his gaze scanning her pale face and trembling frame. He reaches out and touches her skin, demanding to know why her body is so deathly cold. Whittier can only stare up at him, her eyes reflecting the trauma of the previous encounter with the maid. He notices her hair is still wet and warns her that she will catch a cold if she doesn't dry off. He suddenly throws a warm cloth or garment over her head, his movements swift and authoritative. Orcus begins to pat her dry, the repetitive sound filling the tense silence between them. He stares intensely into her eyes and issues a sharp command for her to come closer to him. They sit together on the edge of the bed, a heavy silence hanging over the two of them. Addressing her as Whittier, the emperor tells her she must gain weight or she will break too easily. Taken aback by his blunt concern, she shyly asks if he simply prefers women who are fat. She looks at him with genuine confusion, unsure of how to interpret his sudden focus on her health. Orcus turns his back to her, dismissively stating that his comment was not meant in that way. He looks away with a slight, almost imperceptible smirk, hiding his true thoughts from her. Widya stammers out another apology, her face flushing as a nervous laugh escapes her lips. The encounter ends on an uncertain note, leaving the princess questioning the emperor's true intentions. Staring into his eyes, Widya is struck by the unexpected warmth of his gentle smile. The king issues a sudden command, insisting that Widya must join him for dinner as she gazes back in stunned silence. A subtle, confident smirk plays across his face as he looks down at her. Reaching out with a tender gesture, he places a hand atop her head, catching her completely off guard. Despite the intimate moment, Widya's expression remains strained as she weakly refuses to eat. Lady Barnet mockingly demonstrates how to eat, opening her mouth wide with an intimidating glare. The head lady-in-waiting cruelly reminds Widya that she already had her wedding dinner yesterday and deserves no more food today. Widya attempts to protest by mentioning His Majesty's wishes, but her voice quickly falters. Looming over her with a terrifying intensity, Lady Barnet demands to know if the girl has any objections. Turning her back on the hungry princess, the lady coldly orders a nearby maid to remove the untouched meal. She sneers at the food, calling it a filthy, rustic meal fit only for the common people of Ostrom and beneath a royal's dignity. As a knock sounds at the door, Widya dejectedly tells the maid to take the food away before she gets in trouble. The maid hesitates, glancing back with concern because the princess has not eaten a single thing since the morning. The king suddenly bursts into the room, his eyes sharp with fury as he identifies Lady Barnet as the source of the trouble. Ignoring her excuses, he demands an explanation for why his wife's meals are being removed the moment they are served. Lady Barnet tries to maintain her composure, questioning why the king has come to these quarters in person. She arrogantly claims that managing Widya's meals is her sole responsibility and insists the princess refuses to eat Ostrom food. Refusing to argue further, the king commands that Widya be brought to him immediately. He dismisses Lady Barnet entirely, stating there is no longer any point in speaking with her. The lady-in-waiting is outraged, screaming that ignoring her is the same as disrespecting Princess Zeals herself. He shuts her down with a chilling glare, reminding her that this is not Zeals and forbidding her from ever being alone with his wife again. Widya's strength finally gives out as she collapses, leaving the king to call out her name in shock. He catches her as she falls, her breathing heavy and labored. The princess drifts into unconsciousness, her face pale and exhausted. Widya wakes up startled on a plush sofa, realizing she is in an unfamiliar, luxurious room. Confused and disoriented, she learns from a maid that she has been brought to His Majesty's private quarters. The king sits nearby, bluntly informing her that this state of collapse is the direct result of her refusal to eat. Overwhelmed with guilt, Widya looks down and offers a tearful apology to the king. He ignores her apology and calls her name, focusing entirely on the bowl of food held in his hands. Bringing a spoon to her lips, he tells her firmly that her eating is now a royal order. He commands her to eat, declaring that he is the strongest person in the country and neither Barnet nor Zeals can stop him. Widya gazes at the offered food, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She finally opens her mouth and takes a small, hesitant bite of the meal. The king and the maid watch in silence as she chews the first food she has had all day. Tears stream down Widya's face as she sobs that the king's orders are kind and the food is delicious. The king watches her with a look of quiet understanding, his expression softening. Tucked safely into a large, warm bed, Widya feels for the first time that this place might truly be a sanctuary. He remains by her side, watching over her as she finally sleeps peacefully. In her sleep, Widya whimpers and calls out for her mother. The king leans over her protectively, providing comfort in the quiet of the night. Deep within the library, Lady Barnet rages in the shadows, cursing the king for his interference. She seethes with fury, screaming that everything happening is an insult to the royal family of Zeals. Despite her anger, she reminds herself of Queen Isoya's secret orders to steal the treasures and return to Zeals. She scoffs in the dark, irritated that the barbaric bastard is keeping her away from the girl she was meant to control. Pacing through the room, she plots her next move, desperate to find a way to finish her mission. The lady stands before the large windows, her silhouette framed by the pouring rain outside. Her eyes flash with a sinister intent as she stares into the storm. Stepping out onto the balcony, she ignores the drenching rain as her mind twists with new schemes. She stands alone in the downpour, a dark figure against the castle's stone walls. A cold realization crosses her face as she decides on a more drastic course of action. She admits she planned to weaken Whittia slowly like plucking a bird's feathers, but realizes she no longer has the time for such patience. A wicked, distorted grin spreads across her face as she laughs that the perfect opportunity has arrived. Her hand grips the balcony railing tight, signaling the start of a more dangerous phase of her plan. She whispers to the shadows that she will carry out the queen's orders immediately. Thunder rolls over the castle as the third chapter, Creeping Shadows, begins. Whittia clasps her hands together nervously, asking the king if he must really leave while it is raining so hard. He turns back to her, noticing the deep-seated anxiety in her eyes. He looks at her with a calm, steady gaze that commands her attention. The king stands tall, his presence filling the room as he prepares for his journey. He reassures her that it is only a brief inspection trip and promises that he will return by tomorrow. Whittia looks down, trying to accept his departure despite her obvious fear of being left behind. He reminds her that even as a guest from Zeals, no one would dare to disobey his direct command to leave her alone. The king asks her directly if her fear is specifically about Lady Barnet. He steps closer to her, his voice dropping to a gentle, intimate tone. Cupping her face in his gloved hand, he tells her not to worry and vows that he will protect her. Surprised and blushing, the queen stares in wide-eyed silence as the gravity of the moment settles in. An attendant urgently announces that it is time for the departure, addressing Her Majesty with formal haste. Despite the offer for extra protection, the queen nervously declines, insisting she is fine while her hands tremble. Clad in military regalia, a dark-haired man prepares to mount his horse as the queen watches from under her umbrella. With a confident smirk, the man promises his return while the queen's face flushes as she wishes for his safety. From an upper window, Lady Barnet watches the departure with a cold, unreadable expression. Under a steady downpour, the small cavalry unit begins to ride away from the palace grounds. The heavy curtains of the royal bedchamber frame a gloomy, rain-streaked view of the outside world. Lying in her massive bed, the queen stares blankly at the ceiling, overwhelmed by a sudden, crushing silence. Trembling under the covers, she remains wide awake and paralyzed by the vast emptiness of the room. She rolls onto her side, the rustle of the sheets echoing in the quiet as she tries to find comfort. Memories of the man's lingering smile flash through her mind, haunting her thoughts in the dim light. She admits to herself that his presence was the only thing keeping her profound loneliness at bay. Clutching her chest, she feels a sharp pang of longing as she stares into the shadows. Desperate for his company, she prays for his quick return to fill the void left behind. She convinces herself that her current state of distress is purely due to his absence. Outside, the storm intensifies, drenching the landscape in a blurred sheet of gray rain. Suddenly, the heavy bedroom doors creak open, breaking the silence with an ominous sound. The queen lies still in the dark, her back to the door as a figure enters the room. Lady Barnet stands tall in the doorway, her presence casting a long and terrifying shadow. In a violent burst of motion, a hand reaches down and savagely grips the queen's hair. The queen is brutally dragged from her bed, her face contorted in a silent scream of agony. Confused and terrified, the queen gasps as she is thrown onto the hard floor. She looks up in horror, catching a glimpse of the person who has just violated her sanctuary. Lady Barnet looms over her with a gaze full of pure, unadulterated malice. The queen's hair is pulled back again, forcing her to look into the eyes of her tormentor. Finding her voice, the queen stammers out a plea, asking why this is happening. The queen cries out in pain as she is manhandled, her face flushed with shock and fear. Lady Barnet ignores her cries, dragging the helpless girl toward an unknown fate. The queen's face is pressed against the ground, her eyes wide with the realization of her vulnerability. Desperate and terrified, she screams for help, but her voice is drowned out by the storm. The queen is dragged ruthlessly across the floor, her dress billowing out behind her. Thunder rumbles overhead, masking the sounds of the struggle within the palace walls. A flash of lightning illuminates the tall windows, casting a flickering light over the scene of abuse. Somewhere else in the palace, a maid wonders aloud if the queen is all right being alone. The maid, Yulia, cowers under a blanket, admitting she would be too scared to stay in a room by herself. A fellow servant scoffs at Yulia's fear, noting that Lady Barnet is always by the queen's side like a shadow. Lady Barnet sneers at the rustic nature of the queen's origins, her contempt finally boiling over. The queen looks up with a tear-streaked face, unable to believe the venomous words being spat at her. Her long hair splayed across the floor, the queen is reduced to a state of total helplessness. With a powerful shove, Lady Barnet sends the queen sprawling toward the balcony. The elder woman tells her to shut up, calling her a filthy bitch, with chilling coldness. Lady Barnet adjusts her collar, her expression one of utter disdain for the girl at her feet. Reaching down, she orders the queen to get up, preparing to continue the ordeal. The queen realizes this is revenge and punishment for the brief moments of peace she dared to enjoy. She feels she is being penalized for feeling relief and for eating on her own while the man was away. Paralyzed by sheer terror, her body refuses to move as she cowers on the floor. Panic sets in as she finds it increasingly difficult to draw a proper breath. Lady Barnet looms over her once more, the shadow of her figure blotting out the light. The queen groans in pain, hunched over on the floor as the rain beats against the windows. With a wicked laugh, Lady Barnet tells her that no one will hear her screams over the thunder. The woman expresses regret that she can't torture her slowly to death, as her time has run out. Sneering at the pathetic sight, she mocks the queen for acting important and getting spoiled. Lightning flashes as Lady Barnet draws a sharp dagger, her face twisted in a murderous grin. Staring at the blade, the queen's eyes fill with a final, terminal dread as she realizes the intent is murder. A sudden realization strikes as wide-eyed shock washes over the young woman. Trapped in the rain, she desperately warns her captor that a murder here will never go unpunished, but the older woman merely offers a chilling, mocking smile. With a sinister grin, the woman reveals a forged suicide note, detailing a plan to frame the barbarian king for the girl's shameful death. Paralyzed by the horrific scheme, the young girl stares ahead in utter disbelief as her fate is cruelly laid out before her. Refusing to accept this end, she thinks of the man she loves and the immense sadness her death would bring him. The weight of the betrayal hits her hard as she realizes the devastating impact this false narrative would have on his heart. Determined to fight back, a single word of defiance escapes her lips as she prepares to resist. In a sudden explosion of movement, the girl lunges forward and drives a hidden blade into the older woman's side. Shocked and gasping, the villainous woman stares down in horror at the wound while the girl glares back with newfound resolve. Tears streaming down her face, the girl declares her absolute will to live because she must see the man she loves once again. A desperate struggle ensues as hands clash over a sharp blade, the tension vibrating through the air. With a crazed expression, Lady Barnet lunges at the queen with a knife, her murderous intent laid bare. The blade edges closer in a deadly arc, threatening to end the monarch's life in an instant. The queen screams out in pure terror as the cold steel of the weapon draws near. Shadows consume the scene as the violent encounter reaches its dark climax. The next day arrives, marked by the heavy, rhythmic footsteps of guards moving through the palace. A man's eye narrows with intensity and focus as he processed the gravity of the recent assassination attempt. Vios reports that Lady Barnet tried to kill the queen last night, but a maid named Yulia intervened just in time. Though the queen is safe, she suffers from injuries and a severe fever while Barnet remains in a frenzied, murderous state. The king orders that the captive Barnet be kept alive at all costs until he can interrogate her himself. The king stands vigil in the infirmary, watching over the unconscious queen as doctors and maids attend to her. The queen lies deathly still, her pale face a testament to the ordeal she has endured. The king cries out the name, Widia, in anguish, desperate for any sign of life from his wife. The physician warns that her survival now depends entirely on her remaining physical strength. Distraught by her ghostly pallor, the king demands to know if she will truly survive this. The doctor explains that her frailty and long exposure to the rain made the bleeding far more dangerous. A shocking revelation emerges. The woman lying in the bed is not Widia, but a girl named Idol. The king stares in stunned silence as the truth of her identity begins to settle in. It is revealed that Idol is Princess Widia's half-sister, used as a substitute for this marriage after years of abuse. Gario returns from his investigation to confirm the details of this elaborate deception. The king is haunted by the realization that his bride was merely a substitute sent to face his wrath. The investigation points to Queen Isoya of Zels as the mastermind who sent Barnet to kill the girl. Heavy with guilt and complex emotions, the king requests to be left alone with the sleeping Idol. The attendants bow and exit, leaving the room in a somber, heavy silence. Idol's breathing is shallow and labored as she fights through her feverish slumber. The king blames himself for the tragedy, wishing he had noticed the truth of her situation sooner. He wonders how much loneliness and pain her fragile body had to endure while living as a shadow. He recalls the deep sadness in her violet eyes and finally understands the reason behind her haunting gaze. Leaning close to her, the king softly pleads for Idol to wake up and return to him. He declares that regardless of the lies or what others say, she is truly his wife. Several days pass over the silent towers of the castle as the recovery process begins. Chapter begins with Idol still resting in her chamber, the morning light filtering through the windows. A soft moan escapes Idol's lips as she finally begins to stir from her long unconsciousness. The king is immediately by her side, startled and hopeful as she starts to wake. Idol looks up in a daze, trying to make sense of her surroundings and the man before her. Relieved, the king asks if she has regained consciousness and offers her anything she might need to eat. Idol closes her eyes again, her voice a mere whisper as she struggles to speak. She weakly mutters the name, Lord Yawen, reaching out to him in her semi-conscious state. The king is struck by the sound of his name on her lips, watching her with renewed intensity. Outside, the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind provides a peaceful backdrop to the recovery. The physician informs Idol that she is out of danger and can finally get out of bed, though she must not overstrain. Flashbacks show the chaotic night when the assassin loomed over the queen with a blade. Idol warmly thanks her maid Yulia, admitting she doesn't know what would have happened without her. Yulia joyfully notes that the king was so worried he was on the verge of collapsing himself. The maid reveals that the king spent every free moment by her side, even sleeping on the sofa to stay close. A sudden knock at the door interrupts their conversation, signaling a visitor. The king enters the room, clearing his throat as he checks on Idol's progress. Yulia is startled by the king's sudden appearance and quickly pays her respects. The king dismisses the maids, desiring more private time to speak with Idol alone. He gently scolds Idol for trying to get up too soon, insisting she rest until she is fully recovered. The girl stares in wide-eyed shock as she comes face to face with the intense, piercing gaze of the young man. Bowing her head in deep regret, she offers a sincere apology for the immense trouble her actions caused the king and the people of Ostrom. Her breath hitches in her throat as she struggles to find the courage to voice the secret she has been keeping. Steeling her resolve, the girl realizes she can no longer stay silent and must finally speak the truth. Standing before the man, she confesses the heavy burden of her deception, admitting that she is not actually the Princess of Zeals. Wringing her hands in distress, she suggests that their marriage should be annulled and forgotten since she is not the true bride. The girl winces and recoils in surprise as a sudden, sharp realization or reaction cuts through the tension. The man looks on with a calm, unwavering expression, his sharp eyes fixed intently on her as she awaits his judgment. In a surprisingly gentle gesture, he reaches out and places a hand on her head, offering a moment of unexpected comfort. He speaks softly to her, calling her a white rose of Zeals, and signaling that he has more to say regarding her status. Kneeling before her, he vows to send an official envoy to declare her and Widia as the officially recognized twin princesses. As he explains that this plan leaves no room for refusal, he looks her in the eye and asks if she truly wishes to return to Zeals. Overwhelmed by her perceived insignificance, she wonders if someone as small as her is even permitted to have a wish. Trembling with a lack of self-worth, she looks away and whispers that she believes she has no value at all. The man leans in closer, questioning if her hesitation and fear are rooted in her feelings for someone else. A tense atmosphere hangs in the air as Idol looks down while a dark-haired man stands over her. Wide-eyed and trembling, Idol gazes up in complete confusion. The man leans in close, demandingly asking about the identity of Yawen, the name Idol repeatedly calls out in her sleep. A heavy silence fills the room as the man closes his eyes, waiting for an answer from the stunned girl. Idol warmly recalls Lord Yawen, describing him as a kind, older brother figure who frequently gave her sweets so she wouldn't go hungry. The dark-haired man listens intently as the name of Lord Yawen is invoked once more. Overcome with emotion, Idol's eyes well up with tears as she remembers her past. The man's expression softens slightly as he observes Idol's raw vulnerability. Idol confesses her painful origin as a child who shouldn't have existed, noting that Lord Yawen was the only person in the palace who treated her with pity and kindness. In a sudden, tender move, the man pulls Idol into a firm embrace, whispering her name. Holding her close, he commands her not to hate the circumstances of her birth, insisting she has done nothing wrong. He asks if she hated her mother before declaring he is glad the king of Ostrom was his father, as it allowed them to meet. The man softly confesses his love for Idol. Startled by the confession, Idol listens as he announces his desire for her to carry a new name from this day forward. He bestows upon her the name Idelcia, a title fitting for the kingdom of Ostrom while keeping her original name as a nickname. Affirming her worth, he proclaims that she will be reborn starting today. Issuing a royal order, he commands Idol to remain by his side forever. Tears of relief and joy stream down Idelcia's face at his words. Idelcia tearfully accepts her new life, responding with a devoted, "Yes, Your Majesty." Reflecting on her past, she remembers the crushing weight of being completely alone and desperately wanting someone to forgive her existence. The king strides purposefully through a stone corridor flanked by his loyal attendants. A cold, determined smirk plays on the king's lips as he approaches his destination. The king arrives at a dark dungeon cell where an older woman clings to the iron bars in shock. The woman, Lady Barnet, erupts into a frantic, crazed smile, believing the king has finally come to release her. She demands to be let out immediately, claiming her imprisonment is an unforgettable insult to her life. The king looks down at Lady Barnet with an icy, unforgiving stare. He mockingly questions how she can ask for release after she tried to murder his queen. Lady Barnet breaks into hysterical laughter, venomously insulting the queen as the daughter of a filthy low-born wench. The woman's face contorts with pure malice and hatred as she stares through the bars. A sinister, mocking cackle echoes through the dungeon as Lady Barnet loses herself in her spite. Unfazed, the king inquires about the current whereabouts of Idol's mother. Lady Barnet claims ignorance, stating the woman ran away around the time the former Queen of Zeals passed away. She explains the friction between the former Queen of Zeals and Queen Isoya, suggesting Idol's mother fled once that obstacle was gone. Lady Barnet bitterly complains that Queen Isoya blamed her for raising the child, staining her reputation as the chief lady-in-waiting. The king realizes that Queen Isoya was the true root of all these tragedies. He sternly declares that he will not tolerate insults toward his queen or her mother and promises a punishment worthy of her crimes. Lady Barnet screams in defiance, insisting that the queen will not remain silent if her chief lady-in-waiting is killed. The king reaches through the bars, his gloved hand moving with lethal intent toward the terrified woman. Enraged, the emperor threatens immediate execution as his subordinate mindlessly repeats her title like a parrot. His Majesty is finally urged to stop as the woman is left coughing and gasping for breath from the intense confrontation. Trembling and breaking into a cold sweat, the woman can only let out a choked gasp of terror. The men walk away, coldly noting that her ultimate fate depends on a message from Zeals regarding her failure to follow orders. Left alone in the dim corridor, she can do nothing but breathe heavily in the wake of her near-death experience. The scene shifts to Idol sitting awake in her grand bed as the morning light begins to filter through the curtains. A voice suddenly calls out her name, causing Idol to look up in startled surprise. His Highness Ortiz offers her a tray of exotic sweets brought all the way from the south. The prince leans in close, personally holding a sweet up to Idol's mouth in an intimate gesture. Blushing furiously, Idol is caught completely off guard as he feeds her the treat. Ortiz watches her closely and asks if the sweets are to her liking while she remains frozen in shyness. Idol reflects on how this mother bird feeding routine has strangely become a routine part of her daily life. Startled into a coughing fit, Idol apologizes while a concerned Ortiz offers to bring her some tea. She stares blankly, realizing that despite the sweetness of the moment, a lingering tension remains between them. Idol wonders why His Highness hasn't yet asked her to accompany him at night. Looking down with a somber expression, she tries to convince herself that she is perfectly fine with the current situation. She gathers her courage to ask if she is truly being recognized and treated as the queen. The prince reacts with a slight hum of curiosity to her sudden and serious question. Ortiz confirms that her assessment is correct, prompting Idol to push forward with her resolve. Idol declares her desire to fulfill her royal duties rather than just being pampered with sweets. The prince stares at her in stunned silence, his eyes widening at her unexpected assertiveness. Determined to connect with the people, Idol announces her goal to master the Ostrom language. She further shocks him by requesting to learn the traditional arts of horseback riding and archery. A heavy silence falls over the room as the prince processes her ambitious request. When Ortiz asks if she has ever even touched a horse, Idol sheepishly admits she never has. She explains that she simply wants to excel at the skills expected of women in this country. Ortiz dismisses the idea, insisting that she should choose an indoor hobby instead of such rigorous outdoor training. Contemplating the choice of a musical instrument, The suggestion of a lyre harp arises as a potential fit for the scene. Shock washes over the young woman's face as she breathes out the word harp, her wide eyes reflecting a moment of deep realization. Determining to succeed, she pledges her very best effort despite a momentary, stuttered hesitation. The camera lingers on her intense gaze, capturing the quiet determination and focus shimmering in her eyes. Leaning in with a piercing look, the dark-haired man asks if she dislikes the proposal, his sharp features shadowed by mystery. Watching his retreating figure, she clenches her hands and admits to herself that reading his true feelings remains a difficult task. A heavy door slams shut with a resonant bang, signifying a sharp conclusion to their private interaction. Standing tall before his guard, the king commands his men to take exceptional care in protecting the queen. The king walks away with a stoic expression while his armored guard stands at attention, spear in hand. Clad in a full helmet, the guard remains motionless and silent, their true thoughts hidden behind a cold visor. Footsteps echo through the stone corridor as the guard begins their patrol, moving toward the arched light of the palace halls. The guard pauses, looking back with a stern and suspicious glare as if sensing something amiss in the atmosphere. A hand reaches out to slowly push open a heavy door, the wood creaking under the weight of an impending secret. Whispers fill the air regarding the king's surprising devotion to his wife from Zeals, noting he cares for her far more than expected. An unseen figure questions someone with a low, demanding you, their presence looming in the darkness. A stern inquiry is made into the recent behavior of His Majesty, seeking any cracks in the king's royal facade. Disgust and disbelief cross the faces of those discussing the cold king of the Black Wolves and his uncharacteristic behavior. A silent, heavy atmosphere hangs over the scene, underscored by the tension of unspoken words. Following the failed assassination attempt by Lady Barnet, observers note that the bond between the king and idol has only strengthened. Calculations turn toward the future, fearing that any child born to the king would immediately become the first heir to the throne. The prospect of an heir is deemed a disastrous outcome for those plotting in the shadows. Queen Idol is officially branded an obstacle that must be eliminated to clear the path for their own ambitions. With cold finality, the conspirators decide there is no other choice. Queen Idol must die. A map illustrates the strategic layout of the Kingdom of Ostrom and its neighboring nations, including Brokdev and Fisyu. The geography expands across the Kleidos Sea to the Kingdom of Zeals and the rugged Nastini region. The towering spires of the royal palace loom over the city, a symbol of power and the setting for the next chapter. Mounted knights in gleaming armor march through the streets, signaling the beginning of a grand military display. Episode, The Beautiful Prisoner, begins as the heavy gates creak open for the day's training. Idol watches from the balcony as her ladies-in-waiting announce that His Majesty will personally lead the Ostrom cavalry training. Idol questions if the king truly intends to fight with a spear, learning that he often leads from the very front lines. The Black Wolf appears on horseback, a formidable figure ready to demonstrate his martial prowess to the onlookers. The ladies urge Idol to watch closely, boasting that their king cannot be defeated by any ordinary knight. Idol's worries about injuries are dismissed with the explanation that all weapon edges have been neutralized for today's drill. Lances collide with a violent crack as the cavalry charge begins in earnest, sending splinters flying through the air. The king maneuvers his horse with lethal grace, engaging a knight in a high-speed display of mounted combat. A knight grunts in pain as the king delivers a precise, powerful strike that shatters his opponent's defense. The king's eyes narrow with predatory focus, his gaze locked on his target with unwavering intensity. With a thunderous impact, the king unhorses his opponent, sending the armored man crashing into the dirt. The crowd erupts into thunderous cheers and applause at the king's overwhelming victory in the arena. Idol gasps in awe at the king's strength, while her ladies-in-waiting beam with pride at their sovereign's performance. Dismounting, the king approaches his sparring partner and offers a hand, praising their hard work. Idol is stunned to discover the knight is actually a woman, as the warrior removes her helmet and thanks the king. Noticing Idol's confusion, the lady-in-waiting asks if she had heard the news regarding the queen's security. Following the recent incident, the king personally requested a special guard and handpicked the knights himself. Idol learns that in Ostrom, a land of nomadic horse riders, female knights are a common and respected tradition. Queen Idoltsaya gazes intensely as her attendant emphasizes that the Bashan's lady knights, the elite of Ostrom, have been personally assigned to ensure her well-being. A mysterious, dark-haired man watches the proceedings with a sharp, calculating smirk. From a high balcony, the man observes the queen below and reflects on the insignificance of someone like himself. The observer maintains a stoic and unreadable expression as he lingers in the shadows. Queen Idoltsaya offers a serene and gentle smile, radiating a calm royal presence. Flanked by her elite guards, the queen walks gracefully through the palace corridors. The fabric of a dress flutters suddenly as someone approaches the royal party. The queen stops in her tracks, eyes widening in surprise at the unexpected figure blocking her path. The visitor bows deeply, greeting Her Majesty Queen Idoltsaya with formal reverence. A young girl looks up with wide, shimmering eyes, clearly starstruck by the royal encounter. Idoltsaya's face lights up with joy as she recognizes the girl as Princess Lindy. The queen warmly expresses her delight that the princess remembers her from their brief meeting on the wedding day. Princess Lindy reveals she has come specifically to make a personal request of the queen. A guard questions Lady Lindy about why she has arrived at the palace without an escort. Blushing with excitement, Lindy explains she heard the Baishan's lady knights were chosen as the queen's personal guards and has wanted to see them for so long. The attendant sternly warns Lindy that such careless statements could cause trouble, noting that the guard was handpicked by His Majesty. Disappointment washes over the young princess as she realizes the weight of the situation. Lindy attempts to clarify her intentions, insisting that the attendant's assumptions are not quite right. The princess looks down momentarily, gathering her courage and resolve. With fierce determination, Lindy declares that she trains every day with the sword and spear because her dream is to join the Baishan's lady knights herself. A desperate pleader begs Her Majesty for a weekly training session with a lady knight. The young woman stands frozen in wide-eyed shock as a sharp "what?" echoes through the air. Her determination remains unshaken as she reiterates her intense desire for the knights to teach her. A voice calls out for Lindy, cutting through the tension of the moment. A regal woman wearing a pearl necklace stands composed alongside a startled young boy. The girl recoils in terror as her mother berates her for such a scandalous outburst toward the queen. Flustered and speechless, the girl struggles to find an explanation for her behavior. The mother bows low to apologize to Queen Idol for failing to raise her daughter with proper manners. The queen maintains a cold, piercing gaze as she listens to the mother's humble plea. Lady Miltia explains it has been far too long and apologizes for not visiting since the queen's wedding. The young girl realizes with a start that this imposing woman is actually His Majesty's mother. Breaking the formality, the girl asks if she may call the queen elder sister. Surprise ripples through the room as another figure offers a formal greeting after a long absence. A pair of twins bicker over who is being more shameless and bold in the presence of royalty. The girl watches in confusion, wondering what the two are even trying to do. A sudden, heavy footstep causes the girl to let out a startled cry of "Yum." A tall, dark-haired man accompanied by an aide with a monocle makes a grand entrance. The girl's face flushes a deep red as she stammers out a greeting to His Majesty. Panic-stricken, she tries to explain that their meeting was nothing more than a coincidence. The girl looks on in stunned silence as the atmosphere shifts around her. The Queen Mother stands tall and formidable while the children peek out from behind her skirts. A formal introduction is made to His Majesty as Lady Miltia offers prayers for his health and spirits. The king gazes down, his presence commanding absolute attention. He asks his mother if she is well and if her life with the children has remained peaceful. He responds with a cool, detached, "Is that so?" after hearing her reassurances. The king abruptly orders Idol to leave with him, leaving her bewildered. Idol tries to protest the sudden departure, her face etched with concern. The Queen Mother bows deeply as the children watch the king's retreating back with wide eyes. Idol is haunted by a single, nagging question: why? She wonders why the relationship between His Majesty and the Queen Mother feels so incredibly distant. As they walk away, a dark, jagged stain is visible on the back of the king's uniform. The scene shifts to the Grand Hall of Castle Ipsenica in Ostrom, where a lavish ball is underway. Nobles gather in small groups, whispering and laughing behind decorative fans. The king notices Idol's anxiety and gently tells her there is no need to be so tense. Count Sodel and Lady Waydell express their deep gratitude to the royal couple for the invitation. Idol steel her resolve to act as a proper host and conduct herself in a manner befitting a queen. She remains determined to stay by His Majesty's side and never allow him to feel embarrassed. An older, distinguished man in a dark cape approaches the royal pair. The king greets the newcomer with a rare, genuine smile, noting it has been far too long. The king warmly identifies the man as his uncle. Uncle Ortiz apologizes for missing the wedding and for the heavy burdens the king has carried since the war. The uncle turns to Idol and praises her beauty, calling it far beyond anything he had heard. The king officially introduces Lord Arthur, the younger brother of his late father and a powerful border lord. Idol blushes and returns the greeting, secretly noting how much the uncle resembles his majesty. She focuses particularly on their eyes, struck by the strong family resemblance. Curiosity gets the better of her as she asks if the two of them are truly that close. The king reveals that his uncle was the one who taught him swordsmanship and was the strongest man he knew. Ortiz jokingly warns the king that lies don't suit him, especially in front of such a beauty. Idol beams with happiness, remarking on the very close bond the two men clearly share. She asks if Ortiz might one day share stories of the king's childhood, much to the king's surprise. The king quickly tells her not to listen to a word he says, while Idol just giggles at his reaction. Excusing himself from the gathering, an uncle departs early because someone is waiting for him. A devious-looking man and a woman in a rose-adorned gown share a knowing, sly look as they observe a young woman nearby. The woman's gaze intensifies, her eyes narrowing with a sharp and calculating expression. Lord Licious stands firm and silent as the noble couple approaches him and his companion with an air of practiced grace. Dressed in an elegant lace-trimmed gown, the woman exudes a sense of predatory confidence. The man offers a polite greeting to His Majesty, inquiring about the well-being of Lord Licious. He mentions that his daughter, Mayashika, has been eagerly anticipating this evening's meeting with the king. With a chillingly expectant smile, the man declares that his daughter is ready to devote her heart and body to serving His Majesty. The couple bows deeply, emphasizing that Mayashika will answer the king's summons at once if called upon tonight. A shocked what escapes as the weight of the inappropriate proposal hangs in the air. Lord Licious looks on with a sharp, piercing gaze while the young woman beside him is frozen in visible distress. Lord Licious remains silent, his expression unreadable as the tension in the room reaches a breaking point. Faced with the king's cold reaction, the man closes his eyes and offers a hollow apology for his perceived impropriety. His Majesty erupts in anger, demanding how they dare utter such words in front of his newlywed wife. A father attempts to justify his previous actions by claiming he was overwhelmed by his daughter's profound devotion to the sovereign. A woman with sharp, calculating eyes watches a man's back as he walks away, her expression unreadable. Coldly dismissing the excuses, the Majesty commands the man to cease speaking and depart from his presence immediately. As the man exits, the woman lets out a chilling, triumphant smirk that confirms her hidden motives. Idol sits alone and dejected in her lavish chambers, framed by heavy dark curtains that mirror her somber mood. Lost in self-reflection, she acknowledges that her rival possesses the very qualities she believes herself to lack. Idol weeps silently, convinced that even if she recovers, her frail health makes her unworthy of the emperor's satisfaction. Haunted by her father's history, she fears the Majesty will eventually abandon her just as those before him did. Driven to despair, Idol contemplates taking immediate, drastic action if given the opportunity tonight. Suddenly, the doors burst open as a man shouts Idol's name, shattering her dark train of thought. The Majesty rushes to her side, demanding to know why she fled her seat and failed to return to the gathering. Startled and flushed with embarrassment, Idol looks up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. He leans in close, his voice laced with concern as he asks if she is feeling unwell or has been crying. Idol quickly averts her gaze, weakly claiming that a mere speck of dust in her eye caused her tears. The emperor stares at her with intense scrutiny, clearly unconvinced by her transparent lie. Turning her head away, Idol finally breaks her silence and confesses that she felt a crushing sense of loneliness. She admits that the mere thought of him one day leaving her side was enough to cross her mind and break her heart. Trembling and weeping, she offers a sincere apology for the jealousy that has taken hold of her spirit. In a sudden move of passion, the Majesty pins her down against the bed, catching her completely off guard. Gasping in shock, Idol stares up at him as the intensity of the moment shifts the atmosphere entirely. He questions her softly, asking if she understands the reason behind his long restraint and why he never asked for her before. The sovereign reveals his true depth, stating he desired to win her heart completely rather than just claiming her body. He notes that her past exposure to malice has made her suppress her own desires, leaving her unable to express what she wants. Firmly clasping her hands, he declares he needs no other woman and waited only for her to ask for him herself. As he moves in for a kiss, he playfully asks if he might be allowed to admire himself just a little for this moment. Idol finally surrenders to her feelings, whispering, "Your Majesty," as they embrace intimately upon the bed. The scene fades on Idol's shimmering eyes, marking a pivotal shift in their complex relationship. The narrative shifts to the Riskin detached palace, a quiet forest retreat where the royal family traditionally spends their summers. Idol gazes at the lush scenery in awe, her mood vastly improved by the refreshing environment. Discovering a bounty of Ribiera fruits, she exclaims at their beauty and how delicious they appear to be. The emperor laughs warmly, reminiscing about how he used to secretly taste these fruits in the forest with Gario. He leans in unexpectedly, capturing a taste of the fruit directly from her lips in a bold, romantic gesture. While Idol reacts with shock and a deep blush, he cheekily remarks that the fruits definitely taste better now. Idol remains frozen in a state of flustered surprise, processing the emperor's playful and affectionate display. Recovering her composure, she asks if he will be hunting tomorrow with the retainers and his brother, Prince Robum. She mentions the traditions of Ostrom and Lord Ortius's competitive nature, only to be met with the Majesty's sudden silence. Idol tilts her head in confusion as the emperor stares at her with a strangely blank expression. The quiet moment is suddenly shattered by a loud, high-pitched call for the Majesty from nearby. Miss Rizius appears under a parasol, feigning surprise at, coincidentally, encountering the sovereign during his morning walk. The Majesty's expression turns cold as Rizius suggests they all walk together through the relaxing forest atmosphere. A mysterious woman offers to accompany the queen back to the detached palace as she prepares to return. The queen stands frozen in shock as the woman pointedly asks if her presence is acceptable. While looming under a large umbrella, the woman suggests she would make an excellent companion for the newly arrived crown princess. A sudden, cold apology cuts through the air as the king addresses Miss Rizius directly. Miss Rizius maintains her poise, declaring her unwavering determination to serve His Majesty with complete devotion. The queen stares in stunned silence as the tension between the king and Miss Rizius reaches a breaking point. The king ruthlessly rejects her, vowing that Idol is his only wife and he will never involve himself with another woman. Speechless and humiliated, Miss Rizius can only stare back with wide, trembling eyes. With a panicked exclamation, she quickly excuses herself from the king's crushing presence. Left alone, the woman bites her lip in a fit of suppressed rage and bitter frustration. The scene shifts to a quiet, empty gazebo nestled within the lush palace gardens. A vibrant basket filled with beautiful rubiella fruit sits prominently on display. The queen approaches tentatively, asking if she has caused any trouble or interrupted the peace. A gentle voice reassures her that her presence is a source of happiness. The queen explains she found the fruit in the forest with the king and hoped to make jam for Lady Miltia. She pauses, suddenly remembering Prince Robum's absence from the day's events. The woman invites her to sit, noting how lonely the palace feels with all the men out hunting. She reveals she kept her 12-year-old child in the palace instead of letting him join the hunt. The queen reacts with confusion, questioning the reason behind such a protective decision. The woman explains that the child's position is different because, unlike the king, he wasn't born with the expectation of rule. Driven by a mother's fear, she admits she cannot bear to expose the child to any potential danger. She asks for a moment of the queen's time to talk more deeply about their shared lives. The queen is stunned as the woman reveals that she, too, was forced into a political marriage. She recalls her mother's harsh parting words to forget her homeland and live solely for the children of Ostrom. Her voice trembles with grief as she confesses her ultimate failure to raise her first child, Ortius. Lady Miltia laments her past helplessness, revealing that the senior ministers of the time utterly despised her husband. Constantly under watch and rarely alone, she recalls how painfully brief her time with His Majesty the King truly was. Reflecting on Lord Ortius, the narrator realizes they were wrong to assume the relationship was strained due to mutual dislike. Stunned into silence, the young woman gazes up as the name Lady Miltia hangs heavily in the air. Lady Miltia apologizes for burdening her guest with such a dull story, though the listener quickly insists it was no trouble at all. The conversation takes a sharp turn as the name Tiona is brought to the forefront. Wide-eyed and trembling, the girl reacts with utter confusion to the sudden revelation. Desperate to smooth over the tension, the guest exclaims that she truly wants to hear all of Lady Miltia's stories, regardless of the topic. A soft smile of gratitude crosses Lady Miltia's face as she offers a quiet word of thanks. Suddenly gasping, The girl's eyes fly wide as a realization strikes her like a physical blow. Looking down with a somber expression, she offers a shaky apology while the weight of the situation settles between them. In a moment of shared vulnerability, the woman admits she longs to hear about the king as he is now from the person closest to him. Caught off guard by the request, the girl wonders if she is even suited for such a task. Realizing how long she has been talking, the woman stops herself with a gentle laugh at her own expense. Urging her guest to drink before the tea gets cold, Lady Miltia receives a polite and thankful response. The girl expresses a sincere desire to help Lord Orcius, hoping she can find a way to be useful to him. Closing her eyes, she takes a slow, steady sip of the prepared tea. A peaceful silence falls over the garden as the two women share a quiet moment of reflection. Her vision suddenly blurs, the world spinning as her eyes struggle to remain open. The scene fades into a daze of abstract numbers as her consciousness begins to slip away. A fist slams down in frustration as the narrative shifts to the title, Hearts That Empathize. Standing by the window in deep thought, the king is addressed by his loyal subordinate. The atmosphere in the room is suffocating as the king asks the terrifying question, will Idol survive? Reports confirm that the patient's nightly order acted instantly when the queen collapsed, forcing her to expel the poison and administering an antidote. Encouraging news arrives as the doctor notes Lady Idol's appetite and physical strength are finally improving. The king listens intently as the recovery is attributed solely to the queen's own physical resilience. Dismissing his attendant with a sharp command, the king remains alone with his brewing rage. Consumed by fury, the king curses his hesitation and wishes he had executed the culprits on the spot. Suspicion immediately falls on Lady Barnet as they search for the mastermind behind the attack. The king questions if someone is still carrying out Lady Barnet's will, but his advisor notes she was already handed over to Zeals. The advisor argues it is unlikely she is responsible, given she has been confined in prison the entire time. With a cold, piercing gaze, the king realizes that if she isn't the culprit, the truth is far more dangerous. The sun sets over the Risken detached palace, where the poisoned queen lies in recovery. Idol remains motionless in her bed, surrounded by the heavy silence of the infirmary. Her eyes flutter open as she slowly begins to emerge from the darkness of her coma. Vivid memories return of the tea prepared by Lady Miltia, the last thing she tasted before the world went black. She looks around the dim room, trying to ground herself in the waking world. A figure keeps watch by her side, his face etched with exhaustion and worry. Narrowing his eyes, the king notices the slight movement of her eyelashes as she stirs. The king erupts in a mix of shock and relief, shouting her name as Idol finally wakes. He immediately barks orders to fetch the doctor while Idol looks on in a daze. The two share a heavy, silent look as the reality of her survival begins to sink in. Clinging to her hand, the king expresses his profound gratitude that she has finally regained consciousness. Struggling to speak, Idol recounts her last memory of having tea with Lady Miltia. She describes the sudden, terrifying tightness in her chest that followed the gathering. Her eyes widen in horror as the king confirms the truth. Poison was slipped into her drink. He reveals that the queen mother is in seclusion and everyone at the gathering has been detained. The king explains that seclusion signifies he now has full authority to dictate their punishment. Refusing to believe the accusations, Idol cries out in protest against the harsh measures. She desperately defends Lady Miltia, insisting there is no way she could have committed such a crime. The king remains cold and objective, telling her that the verdict is not for her to decide. Flashing back to Miltia's kind words, Idol remains convinced of her friend's innocence. She pleads with Lord Orcius to listen, her heart breaking at the thought of a wrongful execution. Idol maintains that Lady Miltia is a gentle person who truly cares for the king. Startled by a sudden movement, she looks up as the king draws closer. The king admits he nearly lost his mind at the thought of losing the woman he loves. Realizing the king is actually trembling with fear, Idol whispers his name in realization. His voice hardens as he vows never to forgive the culprit and promises to capture them without fail. Overwhelmed by his intensity, Idol can only manage a choked-off cry as he holds her close. A dark-haired youth offers a chilling parting gift of false comfort, telling a shaken woman to rest peacefully while promising his inevitable return. The woman sits paralyzed on her bed in a state of absolute shock, her wide, trembling eyes reflecting a deep and sudden sense of dread. Disturbing rumors begin to spread like wildfire through the shadows, whispering the unthinkable. Queen Mother Miltia poisoned Queen Idelcia. The conspiracy deepens with claims that Miltia plotted to eliminate the queen before she could conceive, all to secure the throne for her puppet, Prince Robelm. Driven to a vengeful rage by this dark revelation, King Orcius moves to imprison Robelm and dismantle Miltia's web of control. Trapped behind glass and consumed by despair, the woman stares out with haunted eyes as her world collapses under the weight of these treacherous truths. Idle resolves to uncover the truth herself, realizing she cannot allow the current situation to continue. Approaching her attendant, she prepares to make a formal request to Lady Janishek. Lady Janishek turns in surprise as the door opens. The attendant cries out in alarm, warning Her Majesty that she is not yet well enough to be out of bed. Sir Vias enters the room and bows, acknowledging that the queen has summoned him. Vias warns Idle that the poison used against her was powerful and that further strain will only cause the king more worry. Idle expresses her sincere gratitude to Sir Vias for making time to meet despite his demanding schedule. She begins to explain the heavy reason behind her urgent request for a meeting today. The queen's expression turns somber as the topic shifts toward the king's mysterious past. Idle admits her concerns regarding His Majesty's history but hesitates to move forward. She confesses her fear that the king might grow to hate her if she pries into his secrets. The queen describes an invisible, cold wall of distance that seems to separate the king from Lady Miltia. Despite her growing anxiety, a sharp internal conflict plays across Idle's face. She admits a deep, driving desire to understand exactly what transpired between the two of them. Sir Vias looks at her with a piercing, knowing gaze as he addresses her. He correctly guesses that she seeks advice because she fears the king will dislike her for investigating his past. Vias boldly concludes that the root of her worry is her genuine love for King Orcius. Startled by his directness, Idle falters and lets out a flustered exclamation. Blushing deeply, the queen finally admits her profound feelings of affection toward the king. Vias smiles, noting her feelings are expected, before preparing to speak on the king's past. A sudden presence at the door startles them both as a voice announces an immediate entrance. The king stands in the doorway, his intense gaze fixed upon Idle as she whispers his name. The king asks why she is there, noting Lady Janishek reported she had not yet fully recovered. Idle senses a latent tension between the king and the queen mother, worrying her husband might find her curiosity improper. The king continues to stare at her, the atmosphere in the room thick with unspoken words. The queen's eyes widen in shock as the weight of the situation settles over her. A heavy silence fills the space as the characters stand frozen in a moment of mutual realization. Idle immediately offers a humble apology, fearing she has overstepped her bounds. The king softly reassures her that there is absolutely no need for her to apologize. The conversation turns serious as the king addresses the queen with formal weight. Sir Vias prepares to speak on the matters lying deep within His Majesty's heart. Vias advises the king that if he intends to spend his life with Idle, he must speak honestly about his past with the queen mother. The king remains silent and contemplative, his face partially obscured as he considers the advice. The king reveals he has received word from Lord Vias and Lord Gario regarding a new development. Vias listens intently as the king acknowledges the update with a grim look. The king turns his focus back to Lady Idle, his expression unreadable and sharp. He announces that he, too, has a significant report that must be shared. A frantic man screams his innocence, desperately claiming he is not the culprit. The atmosphere shifts to a tense interrogation as the truth begins to unravel. Lord Lycius is confronted with the disgraceful sight of the completed evidence against him. The investigation reveals a maid confessed that a relative forced her to poison Idle's tea. The accused man tries to dismiss the queen's claims as an exaggeration while he recoils in fear. The investigators reveal Idle ingested lethal poison and was only saved by swift intervention, despite claims it was just a laxative. When the man continues to swear his innocence, he is challenged to prove his claim. A bottle of the substance is thrust forward, causing the accused to gasp in shock. He is coldly commanded to taste the liquid himself to verify its contents. The man's face contorts with absolute terror as he realizes he has been trapped by his own lies. The king demands to know the final outcome of the confrontation. Vias reports that Lord Lycius swallowed the poison himself and collapsed once he realized there was no escape. Even while bedridden, Lycius claims he only meant to separate the king and Idle to install his daughter, Mayashika. The king reacts with disgust, calling the man's excuses completely absurd. Regrettably, because Lycius's high nobility, the maximum punishment cannot be legally imposed. Instead, his lands will be confiscated by the royal family, marking a total fall from power. Vias notes that Gario is already selecting a suitable marriage destination for the disgraced lord's daughter. The king listens with a dark, brooding expression as the fate of the conspirators is settled. The king orders Mayashika to be married off to a distant country rather than sent to a nearby convent. The question is raised whether Queen Idol should be informed of the dark truth behind the plot. The king decides to keep the matter confidential to avoid placing an emotional burden on his wife. He lingers on a final thought, sensing that the situation is far from over. The king admits the matter feels more complicated than it appears and intends to observe it longer. Vias accepts the decision but shifts the conversation toward another pressing matter. He reminds the king that Idol is striving to become stronger specifically for his sake. Vias leaves the king with the wisdom that true spouses are those who share even their weaknesses. The king reflects on these words, his eyes showing a rare moment of vulnerability. The king finally approaches Idol's door and announces his arrival to join her. Lord Orcius stands before a seated girl, checking to see if she is able to get up after her ordeal. He quickly warns her not to strain herself and insists she remain seated while she weakly confirms she is all right. A heavy silence falls between them as the gravity of the situation settles in the quiet room. With a sharp, focused gaze, Lord Orcius prepares to reveal the identity of the person who poisoned her. To her absolute shock, he names Lord Lycius as the culprit behind the assassination attempt. Stunned and processing the betrayal, she can only repeat the name of the man she thought she knew. Orcius explains that Lycius acted purely out of cold self-interest rather than a personal grudge, urging her not to dwell on the shock. Driven by a new resolve, she questions the implications of Lycius being the culprit and asks if she may visit Lady Miltia. Despite her weakened state, she is absolutely determined to go through with the visit today. A close-up reveals Orcius looking down thoughtfully, his hand near his face as he considers her request. Before they proceed, Orcius leans in close and asks with deep intensity if she will stay by his side regardless of who he truly is. She shouts her agreement immediately, apologizing for even daring to want to know the secrets hidden in his heart. Softening his expression, he asks if he may take a little pride in the fact that she truly wanted to know him. The scene lingers on her shocked expression as he reaches out to gently touch her face. Her eyes widen in a mix of surprise and dawning realization as the physical contact bridges the gap between them. A quiet moment of understanding passes as she begins to see the hidden depth behind his royal mask. Orcius sits beside her in the dim light of the bedchamber, the atmosphere shifting toward a painful confession. He begins to open up about his past, revealing the existence of another brother who has long been kept a secret. The girl listens in stunned silence as the narrative shifts to chapter, A Mother's and Son's Feelings. He explains that he sits there now to tell the story of his younger brother, Enos. The girl's eyes are fixed on him, completely captivated by the tragic weight of his family history. He reminisces about a time when he was 17 and Enos was a bright, happy 12-year-old. Orcius recalls how their mother loved Enos with a desperate, overprotective intensity because he had been frail since birth. He confesses to a childhood jealousy, as Enos was the brother who always commanded their mother's undivided attention. Despite the envy, he remembers Enos as an innocent soul who returned his affection with genuine sincerity. A shadow crosses Orcius's face as he prepares to describe the turning point in their lives. Her eyes reflect the growing tension of the story as she senses the impending tragedy. He explains that one year Enos begged to join the summer hunt, even though their mothers strictly forbade it. Seeing his brother's deep disappointment, Orcius thought it over and decided to help him fulfill his wish. They compromised by agreeing that while hunting was forbidden, a long horseback ride together might be acceptable. As they rode out, the sky turned dark and the weather began to turn dangerously violent. The sound of crashing thunder and heavy rain fills the air as the memory of that day intensifies. A flash of lightning illuminates the chaos of the storm as things begin to go horribly wrong. Enos struggles to maintain control of his panicked horse as it rears up in the middle of the downpour. In a terrifying moment, the young boy is thrown from the saddle and tumbles through the air. The image of his brother's fall is burned into Orcius's memory, a nightmare viewed through a single, wide-eyed gaze. The scene shifts to the aftermath, showing a woman collapsed in grief over a motionless body in bed. The young Enos lies still and silent, the light of his life extinguished by the tragic accident. Orcius stands frozen in the doorway, his face pale with horror as his mother and the staff mourn the tragedy. His mother turns on him with a face twisted by grief and rage, pointing a finger of blame. She screams that if he hadn't tempted Enos to go outside, the boy would still be alive. Her voice rings out with a final, devastating accusation, calling Orcus the murderer of his own brother. The memory fades as the elder Orcus stands in the present, still haunted by those venomous words. He looks away in pain, admitting that even now he believes his mother has never forgiven him for that day. He confesses that because of that scar, he still has no idea how to properly deal with his mother. Overcome with empathy for his suffering, the girl gazes at him with tears welling in her eyes. She pulls him into a sudden, tight embrace, offering him the comfort and warmth he has lacked for years. Orcus looks surprised by the contact, his guard momentarily dropping as he feels her support. She tells him firmly that everything will be all right and that he must find the courage to face the past. She pleads with him to trust Lady Miltia and speak with her, believing his mother is secretly looking for a way to reconnect. Regret washes over the woman as she confesses to speaking cruel words to a child that should have remained unsaid. Her voice falters into a heavy silence, the weight of her past actions lingering in the air. Tears stream down her face as she laments the pain she has caused the children she bore through immense suffering. With a broken heart, she admits to selfishly blaming her innocent son just to find her own comfort. She reflects on the tragedy, now viewing the past events as nothing more than a series of unfortunate accidents. Caught in the grip of her trauma, she confesses that her weakness led to an overprotective stifling of Robelm's life. The daughter-in-law realizes why the king fell into a heavy silence at the mere mention of the royal hunt. Confusion and sorrow hang in the air as the two women face the painful reality of their family's fractured history. A tense silence follows, as the younger woman processes the depth of the mother-in-law's long-standing grief. Seeking a path toward healing, she suggests that the mother-in-law ask the king to personally train Prince Robelm in swordsmanship. A faint, hopeful smile touches the woman's lips at the thought of Robelm finally finding true happiness. The somber mood lightens slightly with a playful remark about Lindy's potential jealousy over the new arrangement. Orcus warmly admits his affection for the energetic Lindy. A flustered and pouting Lindy reacts to the teasing while a gentle smile lingers nearby. Bursting into the room with wide-eyed excitement, Lindy loudly demands to know if they are finished. The sudden intrusion shocks the two women inside, prompting an immediate and sharp reprimand for Lindy. Blushing and nervous, Lindy quickly defends herself by claiming she was simply worried about her big sister. Lindy reminds her sister that she was the one who gave the order to enter, then tries to drag Robelm into the conversation. Robelm offers a timid apology while another woman fumes over the blatant and rude lack of permission. Orcus calmly interjects, noting that he never gave permission for them to enter the room so immediately. A tense silence follows as the group gathers themselves. Realizing the impact of her actions, the sister apologizes for how much her recent fainting spell must have frightened them both. She reassures the children that she is perfectly fine now and invites them to play together again. Overwhelmed with relief and joy, the children stammer out their happy agreement. A radiant, genuine smile breaks across her face as she shares this moment of connection. She reflects inwardly on how this small but vital step is finally shrinking the distance between them. Walking alone through the grand hallway, an official wonders if His Majesty is doing all right. The official approaches the royal chambers and announces his arrival to the king. From behind his gloved hands, the king commands him to enter and receives word of an investigation report from Gario. Entering with a respectful bow, the official prepares to hand over the documents as the king directs him to leave them there. The king stares intensely at the report, his sharp gaze focused on the information within. Scanning the findings, the king grimly confirms that the results are exactly as he expected. The king and a noblewoman sit in a heavy, silent confrontation across from one another. Tension hangs in the air as the wind rustles through the nearby trees. Sitting together in an ornate room, the two begin a serious discussion titled, Surprise Attack. A close-up reveals the king's focused and determined eye as the conversation deepens. The woman bows her head in deep sorrow, whispering a truly sincere apology. She confesses her long-held regret, admitting her past weakness led her to say cruel and harsh words. Calling herself a foolish mother, she laments how she treated the precious child she brought into the world. Orcus reveals his long-standing belief that she wished he had disappeared in place of Enos. Horrified by his words, the mother shouts that such a terrible thought never once crossed her mind. She describes the overwhelming joy she felt the very first time she held him in her arms. Her only wish, she explains, was to have had the chance to raise him with her own hands just like Enos. Orcus listens in stunned silence as his mother's true feelings are finally laid bare. Trembling with emotion, Orcus admits he has been waiting a very long time to hear those words. With a gentle smile, Orcus thanks her and suggests that they talk much more from now on. The two share a powerful, tearful embrace as she thanks Orcus for his forgiveness. Orcus looks away with a sharp, calculating gaze, his mind already turning back to the shadows of the court. He realizes that his vulnerability created an opening and that his true position has become known to those around him. The king's expression hardens as he addresses his mother with a sudden, serious tone. Startled by his change in demeanor, she listens as he declares that Rabel must remain under his protection. She protests the perceived confinement, but he insists he never intended to put that child on the throne. When she questions if Lord Lycius wasn't already the settled culprit, the king's gaze turns cold. He explains that the true culprit will likely attempt to assassinate Rabel next, making this protection necessary. In a stunning revelation, the king identifies the true mastermind behind everything as Arthur. The mother gasps in total disbelief, unable to fathom how Arthur could be capable of such a thing. Her face pales with shock as the weight of the king's accusation sinks in. The king reveals that Arthur was seen at an unlicensed apothecary obtaining the poison used on Idol. The revelation hits hard. The apothecary was merely a pawn operating under the uncle's sinister influence. A moment of sharp realization or shock punctuates the discovery. Grim reports surface, detailing the uncle's secret agreements and his sudden negotiations with Fishway, a faction he has been at war with since spring. Fear takes hold as Ortiz realizes his uncle plans to exploit palace rumors to orchestrate an assassination under the guise of sibling mediation. Despite the difficulty in predicting his uncle's next move, the danger is imminent now that he has successfully entered the palace. Orcus stands firm as a woman, likely his mother, gazes at him with heavy concern. With tears in her eyes, she desperately begs Orcus to protect Rabelm and expresses her unwavering belief in him. She urges him above all else to ensure his own safety during the coming storm. Orcus offers a simple, respectful word of gratitude to his mother. With a small, determined smile, he gives his final affirmation. A sudden, gentle touch on a musical instrument breaks the heavy atmosphere. Idol's eyes widen in surprise as she is pulled back to the present moment. Orcus returns, prompting a warm welcome from those present as the tension shifts. He casually commands her to continue her performance, catching her completely off guard. Flustered and nervous, Idol protests that she hasn't yet mastered the instrument. Orcus playfully challenges her, claiming it's unfair that he's the only one who hasn't heard her play since she already performed for Lindy and Robum. Reluctantly, Idol settles back and prepares to play the harp-like instrument. Blushing and hesitant, she searches for the right notes to begin. As she looks up, she finds Orcus watching her with a soft, encouraging smile. Orcus sits calmly on a sofa, listening to Idol's gentle harp melody as musical notes drift through the air. Deep in thought, Orcus realizes that his defeat would mean Idol's immediate disposal by those who already tried to kill him. His resolve hardens as he looks at the king, vowing that this is one battle he absolutely cannot afford to lose. Breaking the silence, Idol looks up with wide eyes and asks if Prince Rabelm has already been moved to safety. Orcus confirms the news, asking Idol if she has already heard about the secret arrangements. He explains that Rabelm is hidden in a distant monastery for men, protected by a heavy guard to ensure there is no need for worry. Reassured by his preparation, the atmosphere between them softens as the tension begins to ebb away. The two share a quiet, lingering look, the weight of the coming conflict hanging silently in the room. Idol processes the information, her expression solemn as she softly acknowledges his words. Suddenly reaching out, Orcus calls Idol's name and draws her toward him in a firm embrace. Idol is taken by surprise, blushing deeply as she is pulled into his chest. Orcus defends his sudden affection, asking if it is really so surprising for a husband to express his true feelings to his wife. Leaning in close, he whispers a heartfelt confession of love directly to her. Stunned by the sudden vulnerability, Idol asks why he is choosing this exact moment to say such things. Closing the distance between them, Orcus looks into her eyes and asks for her answer. Idol remains silent for a heartbeat, her gaze fixed on him as the gravity of his confession sinks in. Overwhelmed with emotion, Idol embraces him back and tearfully confesses that she loves him too. Their faces are mere inches apart, sharing an intimate moment of connection amidst the looming chaos. Breaking the moment, Orpheus warns her that his uncle will likely launch an attack today or tomorrow. He commands her to leave the palace immediately and seek protection with the female knight order, Patience. Looking at her with absolute confidence, he reminds her that he is the king and promises he will not be defeated. Idol starts to protest, her voice trembling as fear for his safety begins to take hold. She stares at him, her eyes wide with the realization of the danger he is about to face alone. Tears well up and spill over as she struggles to maintain her composure in the face of their separation. Orpheus gently cups her face, his expression softening as he tries to soothe her distress. He pulls her back into a protective embrace, holding her tightly as if to shield her from the coming storm. With fierce determination in his eyes, he vows to protect her no matter what it takes. Idol finally nods in agreement, whispering her consent as she accepts the necessity of his plan. They share a final, desperate kiss as she begs him to return to her safely. The sound of their shared heartbeat echoes through the room as the reality of the war sets in. High above the clouds, the majestic castle stands isolated and silent, prepared for the inevitable confrontation. A close-up reveals the king's piercing gaze, his expression hardened with intense resolve. Seated upon his throne and clutching his sword, the king grimly acknowledges that the long-awaited conflict has finally begun. The castle doors are thrown open as a frantic messenger cries out for the king's attention. The king remains remarkably composed, noting that his uncle has at last set his treacherous plans in motion. Breathless, the guard reports that the area surrounding the castle is now ablaze with the torches of an approaching army. Gripping his blade with lethal intent, the king repeats his uncle's name with cold, focused fury. With a commanding stare, the king orders his forces to take their positions and remain perfectly still until he gives the word. A sudden rush of footsteps echoes through the corridors as another urgent report arrives. The messenger delivers a shocking update regarding Prince Rabelm, who had been seeking refuge at the monastery. Despite the guard's panic over the extreme danger, the king sternly reiterates the need for absolute calm. The devastating news is finally spoken aloud. Prince Rabelm has been killed. A young, pale-haired boy stares forward with wide, haunting eyes. A simple number 7 marks a transition in the unfolding tragedy. Elsewhere, a group of guards discovers the queen collapsed on the ground and rushes to her side. Apara reaches out to the queen, who insists she is fine despite her visible exhaustion. Apara urges the queen not to worry, reminding her that the king is the strongest warrior of all. The queen tries to steady herself, repeatedly whispering that she is all right. Her companion insists that the queen must be the first to show unwavering faith in her husband rather than wearing a despondent expression. Drawing strength from the words, the queen confirms her resolve to her loyal protector. The guards promise that they will reach their hidden base soon if she can only endure a little longer. Internalizing the struggle, the queen tells herself she cannot afford to waver and must remain strong. The group's progress is suddenly halted by a startling sight just ahead. A massive, imposing fortress looms over the darkened landscape. Hostile voices ring out through the woods, shouting that they have finally located their target. The queen and Apara are cornered by enemy soldiers who question if they have found the real queen this time. Realizing the ambush, the guards draw their steel to protect Her Majesty from the incoming attack. The queen is struck with sudden horror, her mind racing over the enemy's ominous mention of this time. A line of heavily armed soldiers emerges from the shadows, weapons leveled at the fleeing party. The queen stands frozen in terror as the enemy closes in, her sanctuary suddenly out of reach. A tense atmosphere hangs over the battlefield as the sound of clashing steel resonates through the air. Caught in a desperate struggle, the king glares defiantly at his assailant while a companion watches in absolute shock. With a mocking laugh, the enemy commander praises the impressive strength and resilience of the sisters standing against him. A young woman screams out in terror as the situation spirals out of control, her face pale with mounting dread. Sweat beads on her brow and her eyes widen in a moment of paralyzing realization as the enemy's trap closes in. The frantic cry for, "Your Majesty," echoes across the clearing as the loyal knight Apara rushes to protect her sovereign. In a horrific display of violence, blood sprays across the air as Apara is struck by a lethal volley of projectiles. The name of the fallen knight is shrieked in agony, marking a tragic turning point in the skirmish. Horror-stricken, the queen stares at her dying protector, her mind unable to process the sudden, brutal sacrifice. Coughing through the pain, the mortally wounded Apara collapses into the queen's arms and urges her to flee with the remaining soldiers. Desperation fills the air as the queen cries out Apara's name, refusing to accept the grim reality of the battlefield. Apara warns that the rebels are highly skilled fighters and that the only hope lies in escaping before enemy reinforcements arrive. The queen adamantly refuses to leave her loyal friend behind, even as Apara begs her to go quickly for the sake of the kingdom. Time runs out as the knights demand the queen retreat immediately to avoid total annihilation. Tears stream down the queen's face as she realizes that splitting their forces will only lead to further casualties and certain death for those who stay. Surrounded and outnumbered, the royal guard engages in a fierce melee against the relentless rebel spearmen and swordsmen. Paralyzed by indecision and grief, the queen agonizes over her next move while her soldiers die to buy her mere seconds. The sound of movement in the brush signals a new threat approaching from the shadows. An arrow thuds into the ground near the queen, followed by the sudden deployment of a tactical device. A thick, obscuring cloud erupts from the impact point, catching the queen completely off guard. Panic strikes the battlefield as more arrows rain down, each carrying a volatile payload that fills the area with smoke. Confused and disoriented, the rebels demand to know who authorized the use of fire arrows and a smoke screen. The enemy forces grow furious as the battlefield descends into chaos, realizing they were never informed of this secondary strategy. Struggling to maintain his footing, a combatant grunts in pain as the toxic fumes begin to take their toll. A loyal soldier screams for the queen to hold her breath and avoid inhaling the mysterious, thick smoke. Gasps and the sound of bodies hitting the dirt signal that the smoke is far more than a simple visual obstruction. A hand reaches out through the haze, grasping for a lifeline in the suffocating darkness. Through the swirling mist, a mysterious figure appears, his gaze obscured and his intentions unknown. The queen looks up in confusion, wondering who this enigmatic savior or new adversary could be. The figure stares down with cold, piercing eyes, standing tall amidst the carnage and the fading smoke. High above the conflict, the imposing and dark silhouette of Ostrom Ipsenica Castle looms over the landscape. Deep within the castle, a sharp-eyed young man confronts his uncle, noting that a late-night visit is quite lacking in manners during this time of rebellion. The king's brother arrives unexpectedly, dismissively questioning the hour as he claims he has only come to gaze upon the face of his beloved nephew. Orcius stands firm amidst a line of armored palace guards, his expression shadowed and wary as the tension in the room reaches a breaking point. The uncle remains composed, his hand resting casually on his sword as he stands before his own retinue of spear-wielding soldiers. With a chilling smile, the uncle declares his true intent is to seize the king's throne from Orcius. Orcius glares back with intense, narrowed eyes, his silent resolve hardening against the blatant declaration of treason. The young prince calmly asks for the reason behind this sudden betrayal, hoping to avoid a fratricidal conflict within the royal family. The uncle reflects on their shared past, noting how he has walked in Orcius's shadow since childhood despite his own extensive training in swordsmanship. A flashback reveals a younger, smiling version of the uncle placing a hand on a wide-eyed, youthful Orcius as they practiced with a wooden training sword. Asserting his royal blood, the uncle claims his strength and presence as a king far exceed those of Orcius. The uncle's face contorts with long-held resentment as he admits he has always questioned why he should not be the one on the throne. He grips his sword tightly, arguing that if he possesses the necessary qualifications, he is simply reaching out for what is rightfully his. Orcius listens grimly, noting that such a ruthless and ambitious way of thinking is perfectly characteristic of his uncle. A sudden, violent movement signals the end of negotiations as someone lunges forward with incredible speed. The sound of steel sliding against leather echoes through the hall as a blade is drawn in a singular, fluid motion. The two relatives clash with a massive impact, their swords locking together in a shower of sparks and raw force. The sheer power of the collision creates a shockwave, the two blades grinding against each other as neither man yields an inch. Orcius exerts every ounce of his strength to hold his ground, his cape billowing behind him from the force of the exchange. The uncle maintains a terrifyingly calm smirk even in the heat of battle, looking completely unfazed by the prince's resistance. Terrified onlookers and royal attendants scream out in horror as they witness the deadly duel unfolding before them. Orcius feels the crushing weight of his uncle's blade, realizing the immense physical pressure he is under. Sweat beads on the prince's face as he recognizes his uncle is truly serious and that a single lapse in his guard will result in instant death. Staring down the length of the shimmering steel, Orcius desperately wonders if he has the strength to win against such a formidable blade. The uncle bellows a command for his soldiers to charge, sending the spear-laden guards rushing toward Orcius. Panicked but focused, Orcius shouts for his own men to block the incoming assault while he remains locked in combat. The palace erupts into a chaotic brawl as the two factions of armored soldiers collide with a thunderous roar. Amidst the melee, Orcius focuses entirely on his primary opponent, his teeth grit in a snarl of exertion. The uncle taunts Orcius during their struggle, mockingly asking if the prince has managed to get even a little stronger over the years. Another massive strike rings out, the sound of clashing metal dominating the noise of the surrounding battlefield. Orcius answers the challenge with a defiant, "Yes, of course," holding his own against the relentless pressure. The battle continues to rage with high stakes, every movement calculated to find a lethal opening in the opponent's defense. The uncle lets out a cold, amused chuckle, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light as he questions Orcius's confidence. The prince's eyes widen in shock as the tip of a blade flashes dangerously close to his face in a lightning-fast maneuver. The two warriors blur past each other in a final, explosive exchange of strikes that leaves the outcome hanging in the balance. Witnesses gasp in shock as the battle reaches a fever pitch, with one observer crying out to his majesty in alarm. A close-up reveals the intense, unwavering gaze of a combatant, his face marked by a single dark trail of blood. The warrior remains unfazed, dismissing the wound as nothing more than a minor scratch that won't hinder his resolve. Clad in a dark, formal uniform, the young man adjusts his black glove with a cold, calculated precision. A sharp metallic sound rings out as the tension between the two opponents thickens. The fighter realizes that their equal sword skills will turn this duel into a grueling war of attrition. He worries that a prolonged fight might allow the neighboring state of Fishway to intervene on his uncle's side. While acknowledging his opponent's impressive skill, he decides to deliberately create a baiting opening. His uncle, an older man in a cloak, laments his aging while marveling that his nephew has equaled his swordsmanship. With a sinister smile, the uncle taunts him, claiming he won't be able to protect his most cherished person if he stays stuck here. The young man's eye widens in sudden realization as a sharp, splashing sound echoes in the background. In a sudden shift of memory, Idle is called out as she walks through a garden carrying a basket. The girl turns in surprise, her wide eyes reflecting a moment of unexpected shock. She recognizes the newcomer as Lord Yawen, her expression softening with a hint of confusion. Lord Yawen approaches with a gentle greeting for Princess Idle, breaking the quiet of the garden. He apologizes for startling her, asking when she managed to sneak up behind him unnoticed. Yawen presents a small gift, explaining that he simply wished to hand it to her personally. He asks with concern if she missed lunch again, mentioning that he heard the news from the chef. Idle looks up at him with a blush, caught off guard by his attentive and caring nature. He leans in close, reminding her firmly that she is a princess, not a servant to her own sister. Touched by his words of support, she offers him a soft and sincere thank you. She calls out his name, Sir Yawen, as they share a quiet, meaningful moment together. Idle confesses her fear, admitting she is afraid to go against those who treat her so harshly. She trembles, worried that her presence will eventually cause nothing but trouble for him. Yawen takes her face in his hands, vowing with absolute certainty that he will surely save her one day. He declares his ambition to achieve great military feats and become a commander respected by all. The princess stares back at him, her face a portrait of stunned silence and dawning hope. As a carriage waits in the distance, Yawen reiterates his promise to change her future. The scene shifts to Idle wearing a floral headpiece, looking down with a somber expression. The memory fades back to the present as Yawen looks on with an intense and focused gaze. Idle lies still, her long hair fanned out around her as Yawen calls her name repeatedly to wake her. She stirs slightly with a soft groan, beginning to drift back toward consciousness. In her hazy state, she wonders who is there, questioning if it is Lord Orcius standing over her. Lord Yawen watches her closely, asking the princess if she has finally awakened. Idle sits up abruptly, gasping in shock as she finds Yawen standing right beside her bed. She looks at him with wide, disbelieving eyes, whispering his name in utter confusion. Panicked, she demands to know why he is here and what kind of place they are in. Her disorientation grows as she looks around, struggling to understand her surroundings. She grabs his cloak, frantically asking about the status of the battle and the knightly order Patience. The princess stumbles in her weakness, and Yawen quickly catches her to keep her from falling. She desperately asks Lord Orcius if the king is safe, her voice filled with mounting dread. Yawen urges her to rest, explaining that the effects of the medicine haven't fully worn off yet. She continues to protest, her thoughts consumed by the safety of His Majesty. His expression darkens as he tells her she no longer needs to obey such a savage king. Idol snaps back in defense, shouting that the king is not a savage at all. She struggles against his grip, screaming for him to let her go so she can return to the king. The princess's face is flushed with anger and tears as she glares at the man she once trusted. She demands an explanation, asking why he is saying such terrible things to her. With a look of pure horror, she asks where they are and why he has kidnapped her. Yawen stares back coldly, warning her that if she returns, they will undoubtedly kill her. He remains silent, his grim resolve unwavering despite her desperate pleas. The sun sets over the formidable stone towers of the Kingdom of Zeals. With a cold, piercing gaze, the Queen of Zeals stands before a stone corridor, her expression hardened with silent fury. Approaching a guarded set of massive double doors, the Queen imperiously demands that the sentries open the way. Her heels click sharply against the stone floor as she strides forward with unwavering, regal authority. When the guards hesitate, she turns her sharp eyes upon them and demands to know if they failed to understand her command. Maintaining his composure, one guard explains that a new system requires an advance appointment to pass through this specific corridor. Outraged by the perceived disrespect, the Queen screams in the guard's face, reminding him of her status as the Queen of Zeals. Shaken by her explosive wrath, the guard cowers in fear as she commands him to step aside immediately. As the Queen storms through the doors, the second guard checks on his shaken partner, noting he was dangerously rude to her. The guards discuss how the Queen has lost the favor of the king and the entire court for damaging the nation's interests. Because of a previous incident involving Lady Barnet, the nation was forced to cede control of the international river's upper reaches. Clenching her teeth in a fit of rage, the Queen marches toward a heavy, barred iron gate deep within the palace. Reaching the cell, she stops and utters the name of the woman responsible for her downfall, Barnet. Staring through the bars at the prisoner, the Queen coldly notes that it has been a very long time since their last meeting. A startled woman cries out in shock as Lady Isoya suddenly appears before her. Desperate and trembling, the captive pleads to be taken away from the cruel treatment she has endured since her return. She pathetically clings to the hope that Lady Isoya has arrived as a savior to rescue her from her plight. Lady Isoya leans in with a chilling gaze, ruthlessly silencing the woman by calling her a useless piece of trash. Towering over her, Isoya demands gratitude for sparing her life despite the massive predicament her failures have caused. She reveals that the only reason the woman remains alive is due to the continued loyalty of her birth and marital families. The lady laments her fading influence, noting that the king has grown cold and the entire court has turned against her. Frustrated and cornered, Isoya realizes that the woman's clan is the only remaining card she has left to play. Isoya seethes with rage, blaming a despicable girl for her downfall while the woman offers a desperate apology. Her eyes burning with murderous intent, the lady screams that she should have killed that girl with her own hands long ago. A sudden noise from the distance startles Lady Isoya, breaking her fit of manic hatred. The captive woman looks up in stunned silence as the confrontation is interrupted. Lady Isoya regains her composure, though the tension in the room remains suffocating. Voices from outside clarify that the newcomer is not a suspicious person but a relative who has shared their story. The mysterious group begs for another chance, claiming they possess a secret plan to turn the tide. A sharp-eyed man watches intently from the shadows as the secret plot begins to unfold. The blonde woman gasps in pure disbelief at the mention of Queen Isoya's involvement. It is revealed that the men who confronted the knightly order were actually covert agents sent by the Queen. The knight admits he secretly cooperated with Arthur to eliminate her from the world entirely. He warns her that she is now a marked target for assassination with no safe place left to hide. Confused and betrayed, she questions why her sister's own knight, Sir Yawen, would be standing before her now. The weight of the betrayal hangs heavy in the air as the truth of the rebellion settles in. Yawen reveals he has abandoned his knighthood to infiltrate Arthur's rebel army from within. He explains that he specifically joined the assassination unit to ensure he could rescue her himself. A flashback shows Yawen ruthlessly taking down an assassin to fulfill his true objective. Overwhelmed, she asks why he would go so far as to abandon his prestigious position and title for her sake. She waits with bated breath for the answer to his radical desertion. The woman stares into his eyes, searching for the motivation behind his dangerous gamble. Yawen looks at her with intense devotion, confessing that he did it all because he desperately wanted to see her again. The confrontation begins as armored knights clash in a chaotic melee, their spears and shields locked in a desperate struggle. Mid-battle, two combatants lock blades in a tense stalemate, their faces mere inches apart as they shout over the din of war. The narrative shifts to a chilling split-screen close-up, contrasting the sinister, wide-eyed grin of an older man against the cold, determined gaze of a dark-haired youth. Standing in a vast, desolate space, the older man taunts the youth by questioning if he is worried about the fate of Idertia. He reveals that the female Knight Orderer Patience has already surrounded Idol, claiming that no amount of effort can save her now. Maintaining a stony expression, the youth remains silent as he processes the gravity of the situation. Internally, the youth warns himself that these provocations are merely a trap designed to throw him off balance. The antagonist pivots his psychological attack, mockingly asking about the youth's brother as a look of realization dawns on him. He questions if the reports from subordinates have reached the youth, feigning a sense of impressed wonder at his composure. With a mocking spread of his arms, the man sneers that the youth's brother must mean absolutely nothing to him. The youth's eyes widen in a moment of pure, unadulterated shock as the psychological blow finally lands. In a sudden burst of movement, the youth lunges forward as the man prepares his sword for the coming strike. Their blades meet with a sharp metallic ring, the youth's face contorted with effort as he tries to overpower his opponent. Gritting their teeth, both men exert maximum force, their eyes locked in a lethal struggle for dominance. The youth's feet slide across the ground as he struggles to maintain his footing against the older man's overwhelming strength. With a powerful, sweeping strike, the older man forces the youth back, the sheer momentum of the blow creating a blur of motion. The youth's sword is sent flying through the air, leaving him wide-eyed and defenseless as it clatters to the ground. Sensing an opening, the older man swings his arm wide while a voice off-screen cries out in alarm for "Your Majesty." Yawen appears, desperately pleading for them to run away together as a new path to escape opens up. A young woman stares back in stunned silence, her pupils dilated with confusion at the sudden proposal. She utters Sir Yawen's name softly, the weight of his presence clearly shaking her resolve. Yawen insists that luck is finally on their side and that she has at last gained her freedom. Despite the offer, she firmly declares that she cannot flee alone and leave everyone behind, insisting she must return to Lord Orcius at the castle. Yawen stands paralyzed by her refusal, his expression hidden as he reels from her decision to return to the fray. She voices her unwavering trust in the elite knights of Ostrom, believing in every one of them to see the battle through. Yawen warns her that Queen Isoya's followers are still lurking and that returning to the castle means certain death. He looks at her with intensity, asking if she truly believes he kidnapped her from the knights by force. The scene lingers on a soft, melancholic smile as Yawen clenches his fist, his emotions boiling just beneath the surface. A tense silence falls between them as Yawen prepares to reveal the true depth of his motivations. Yawen's gaze hardens with a mix of pain and resolve as he prepares to make a formal confession. Finally breaking his silence, Yawen confesses that he has harbored deep feelings of love for her for a very long time. The two share a heavy, silent look, his confession hanging in the air while she remains frozen in shock. He laments that he hoped to win the War of Ostrom and ask for her hand, but their defeat led her to the king of the barbarians. She gazes at him as he admits to the deep regret he has carried since their country fell. Yawen urges her to escape both Queen Isoya and the king of Ostrom, promising she no longer has to be a sacrifice. He reaches out and takes her hands in his, a desperate physical plea to join him in his flight. Looking her in the eye, he tells her she no longer needs to endure humiliation at the hands of the king. She begins to protest, her face shadowed with a realization that his perception of her situation is entirely wrong. To Yawen's utter shock, she tearfully confesses that she does not want to be separated from Lord Orcius. The moment is shattered as a voice cries out again for "Your Majesty," signaling the arrival of the guards. The youth is suddenly restrained by guards, his eyes darting between them and the escalating chaos. As the royal guard arrives, the man shouts for everyone to get out of his way. The youth manages to break free and reclaim a sword, ready to face his opponents once more. Re-engaging in the duel, the youth and his uncle face off, their silhouettes framed by the intensity of the struggle. The uncle grunts in frustration as the youth's movements become sharper and more aggressive. Mocking the situation, the uncle laughs at the disgrace of 3 guards facing him at once. The youth commands the guards to stay back, declaring that this is a private fight between him and Arthur alone. Arthur chuckles darkly, challenging the youth to prove his confidence by defeating him without any help. Arthur muses that there is only one throne and that hesitation only brings danger to those they love. The youth reflects that deep down he still wanted to believe in his uncle, but that hope is finally fading. Orpheus declares his absolute authority, stating with cold conviction that he is the king. Driven by a desperate need to protect Idol, the king sprints across the battlefield, silently urging her to hold on until he can reach her. With a final, determined cry, he resolves to end the conflict right then and there. The scene is dominated by a sharp, high-speed visual indicating a sudden and violent exchange of power. The two combatants pass each other in a flash of movement, their blades completing a decisive strike as they come to a halt. A close-up reveals the intense, pained expressions of both men as they realize the result of their final clash. A single drop of blood falls to the ground, breaking the silence of the aftermath. The youth stands firm in the foreground while his uncle, the rebel leader, collapses heavily into the dirt behind him. A soldier announces to the surrounding troops that His Majesty has successfully defeated the rebel leader. The youth gazes upon his fallen foe with a complicated expression while the sounds of the battlefield continue to echo around them. Kneeling beside his dying uncle, the youth hears the older man admit that he underestimated his nephew's strength. A dark, spreading pool of blood on the ground confirms the lethal nature of the king's final strike. The uncle lets out a weak laugh, addressing Orpheus one last time and telling him not to regret the path he has chosen. The youth observes the fatal wound with a somber realization that his uncle will not survive the night. With his dying breath, the uncle warns Orpheus that it is too early to claim victory, as he has prepared a final, special farewell gift for him. He tells the king to prepare his heart, for dealing with what comes next will be far more difficult than the battle he just won. The older man's voice fades as he tells Orpheus that the future will be harder than he can possibly imagine. The youth remains silent, the weight of his uncle's ominous final words settling over him like a shroud. Nearby, the king's soldiers apprehend the remaining rebels, shouting for them to surrender quietly because the battle has lost its meaning. Loyal guards call out to the king, their voices filled with relief as they confirm his safety after the duel. A refined man with a monocle looks on with a focused, analytical gaze as the situation begins to stabilize. The king asks Vias if everyone else is safe, and Vias confirms with a nervous, stammering affirmative. Prince Robelm suddenly arrives, reporting that communication with the patient's night order has been completely cut off. The king's focus immediately shifts as he demands to know Idol's whereabouts without a moment's delay. A breathless, younger man appears, and the king recognizes him with a start as Robelm. Relieved to see him alive, the king grabs Robelm's shoulders and confirms that the prince has survived the chaos. Vias explains that the news of the prince's death was actually a false rumor spread deliberately by one of their own allies to protect him. He further clarifies that the enemy's attempt to assassinate the knight acting as a decoy has failed. The king realizes that the daring plan to disguise Prince Robelm as a woman to infiltrate the patient's night order was a success. Robelm begs his brother to hurry and save Idol, his sister-in-law, from the danger surrounding her. The king is stunned as Robelm tearfully admits that he was powerless to do anything to stop what happened. Robelm reveals the horrifying truth: his sister-in-law, Lady Idol, has been kidnapped. Back in a rainy city, Sir Yawen confronts Idol about her refusal to be separated from the king, demanding to know what she meant. Idol tells Sir Yawen that he is deeply misunderstanding her feelings, while Yawen looks at her in disbelief. Yawen argues that she was simply isolated in the palace and manipulated into believing a cruel illusion because she had no one to rely on. He insists that it is Idol who is mistaken about her own heart and refuses to accept her explanation. Idol stands her ground, stating clearly that she trusts the king because he was the only one who truly saw her for who she was. She explains that even after the king learned she was a fake princess, he still provided a place for her and showed her true kindness. Yawen's eyes widen with a desperate, frantic energy as he listens to her defend the man he considers a barbarian. He screams that he has been watching her and seeing only her the entire time, his obsession finally boiling over. Yawen shouts that a barbarian king is incapable of possessing a human heart and calls her perception of the king a lie. Idol is visibly shaken, thinking to herself that she has never seen Yawen act this way and finding his behavior terrifying. She tries to assert her identity as the Queen of Ostrom, feeling a growing sense of dread about the situation. Desperate to escape the escalating tension, she tells herself that she must return to the palace immediately. She lets out a confused cry as Yawen suddenly closes the distance between them. In a sudden, violent motion, Yawen pins Idol down, trapping her beneath him. He begs her to run away with him to a place no one can reach, claiming that the king only stands beside her for political reasons and doesn't love her. With a twisted expression of devotion, Yawen insists that he is the only one who truly loves her. Idol cries out in protest, begging him to let go of her as she tries to push him away. Yawen mutters that he has finally managed to get her back with his own hands, terrified that she will leave him if he lets go. Grasping his head in a state of frantic denial, Yawen desperately insists that he is not a mere possession and begs for understanding. Idol recoils in terror and demands that he stop as the situation escalates into a frightening confrontation. Utterly overwhelmed, Queen Idol cries out for Majesty Orcus to save her as she is pinned down. A mysterious hooded figure lurks in the pouring rain, declaring his intent to take the woman back from Yawen. The tension reaches a breaking point as the characters' eyes widen in mutual shock and recognition. A sudden outburst of "phew" signals the arrival of an unexpected and unwelcome presence. The hooded man claims to be Idol's relative and asserts that he has already heard the entire story. A smug son of the Barnett family reveals himself, his eyes glinting with a predatory confidence. Standing amidst the storm, the intruder mocks their surprise while the title card, Chapter 11, Revenge, looms over the scene. A sharp, lethal blade is unsheathed, signaling the immediate transition from words to violence. The villainous Barnett heir dismisses any objections with a cruel smile, stating that nothing else matters now. He cold-bloodedly warns that all intruders will be forcefully removed from his path. The combatants lock eyes in a moment of lethal intent before the first strike is thrown. A powerful blow is landed as the two men clash violently in the middle of the room. Yawen screams for Lady Idol to run quickly while he attempts to hold off the vengeful attacker. The Barnett's son lunges forward with terrifying speed, his focus narrowing entirely on his target. A brutal physical struggle ensues as one man is thrown to the ground with a heavy thud. Idol watches in horror, screaming Sir Yawen's name as the violence turns one-sided. The attacker gains the upper hand, pinning his opponent down with a display of overwhelming strength. With a disdainful "Tisish," the villain prepares to finish the fight while Yawen struggles beneath him. The two men grapple on the floor in a desperate scramble for control while Idol looks on, paralyzed by fear. Yawen curses his luck as he is violently shoved back, losing his momentum in the fray. Shock and alarm register on Yawen's face as the glint of a knife returns to the forefront of the struggle. A sharp gasp of pain escapes Yawen as he is struck down by his relentless pursuer. The Barnett heir stands over a fallen Yawen, preparing to deliver a final, decisive blow with his dagger. Trembling with dread, Idol gasps Sir Yawen's name as she realizes the severity of his injuries. The heavy silence is broken only by the sound of a blade being readied for its grim task. Idol sits huddled on the bed, her eyes wide with trauma as she watches the life-and-death struggle unfold before her. Relieved that he is still alive, Idol's hope is quickly dampened by the sight of Yawen coughing up blood. A heavy boot stomps down, crushing any hope of a counterattack as the villain asserts his dominance. The Barnett heir offers a mocking good morning to Queen Idol, noting that she likely doesn't recognize his face. Terrified and confused, Idol demands to know who he is and why he has invaded her sanctuary. He reveals that he was the one who manipulated Queen Isoya and used the man before them as mere bait. The villain explains that the man's obsession with Idol often interfered with his mother's political affairs. Confirming his identity as the son of the Barnett family, he watches Idol's realization turn into pure shock. He blames Idol for his mother's imprisonment and the downfall of House Barnett, which is now breathing its last. He plots to fulfill Isoya's wishes to secure his own rise to power, acknowledging that she is still the queen. Ignoring the dying man's pleas for Idol to run, the villain focuses entirely on his captive audience. Idol stares into the abyss, her mind racing at the mention of Queen Isoya's dark desires. The blood-stained knife is held aloft, a terrifying reminder of the violence that just occurred. Idol lets out a confused, "Huh?" as the knife is suddenly dropped and clatters onto the floor. The villain clarifies that while the queen wants her dead, he has far more sadistic plans for her future. He vows to defile her body and drown her in despair before finally ending her life. Looming over her with a twisted smile, he declares that this horrifying ordeal is his ultimate revenge. Idol gasps for air as the villain's shadow completely envelopes her. The scene focuses on Idol's face, contorted in a silent scream of absolute psychological breaking. Rapid, shallow breaths fill the room as the weight of her hopeless situation sets in. Suddenly, a new figure bursts onto the scene with a look of murderous fury and a clenched fist. A powerful strike is telegraphed, cutting through the air with a deafening whistle. The newcomer lunges forward, delivering a massive blow that sends the Barnet heir reeling away from the queen. Lord Orcius stands over the scene, his breath hitching as he finally reaches the site of the confrontation. Overcome with emotion, he cries out for Idol, his voice cracking with desperation and relief. The son of the Barnet family lies defeated on the ground, bruised and bleeding from the impact of the final blow. Lord Orcius pulls Idol into a tight embrace, both of them weeping as they realize the immediate danger has passed. Orcius checks her over frantically, asking if she is hurt, while Idol tearfully assures him she is fine and glad he is safe. Guards and attendants rush into the room, scolding the Majesty for rushing alone into such a high-risk situation. Lord Orcius declares that he will take charge of the situation and deal with the remaining threats personally. Holding Idol protectively, Orcius demands to know the identity of the fool who dared to harm her. Idol looks toward the fallen Yaowen with wide eyes, pleading with Lord Orcius to save him immediately. Orcius looks back at the wounded man, the weight of Idol's desperate plea hanging in the air. Yaowen remains motionless on the floor as the rescue team moves in to secure the area and assess the damage. A close-up of Yaowen's face shows him unconscious, finally broken by the physical and emotional toll of the night. A transition card reveals that 1 month later, the dust has finally settled on the kingdom's recent turmoil. Lord Orcius sits in his study, reflecting with a confidant that everything has finally come to an end. It is revealed that Queen Isoya has been sentenced to life imprisonment in the dilapidated castle of Zeals. The conversation turns to the Barnet heir, who is being punished as a traitor for his role in the kidnapping. The rest of the Barnet direct bloodline has scattered after being stripped of their titles and confiscated of all property. Orcius shifts the topic to Yaowen, specifically clarifying the fate of the man who aided Idol's abduction. Because Yaowen provided testimony linking the queen to Arthur, the Zeals side cooperated, allowing him to live an upright life. Orcius acknowledges that while Yaowen's help was vital, it does not fully erase the crime of abducting Lady Idol. Elsewhere, in a sunny garden pavilion, Idol expresses her gratitude to Rob Elm for his bravery. During a tea party, she explains that Lord Orcius credited Rob Elm with showing them the location to reach her. Rob Elm remains silent and dejected, feeling that he actually failed to do anything meaningful during the crisis. Idol gently disagrees, thanking him for chasing after them alone and providing the hope she needed to survive. Rob Elm admits he lost the trail while chasing his sister and only survived the bomb smoke due to the patient's night order protection. He continues to beat himself up, insisting he was useless because she was only found by a random witness. Suddenly, Rob Elm slams his hand down and shouts that he has decided to join the army to become stronger. Idol is stunned by his wavering resolve, having tried to tell him that military life will be harsh regardless of his royal blood. Lady Miltia watches the exchange, appearing surprised but ultimately choosing to respect her son's strong-willed decision. Miltia explains that she must grow as a mother and stop being overprotective for the sake of the children's growth. She turns to a young girl named Lindy, asking if she feels lonely now that things are changing so much. Lindy, distracted by a snack, simply comments on how delicious the sweets from her big sister are. Miltia whispers to Idol that Lindy hasn't been herself since the incident, as she was very attached to Arthur. Lindy stares blankly ahead, her youthful innocence shadowed by the trauma of Arthur's disappearance. The tea party is interrupted by the sudden and imposing arrival of His Majesty, Lord Orcius. Orcius explains he came to escort Idol and also to see his siblings' faces after the long ordeal. He notices their shocked expressions and sheepishly asks if his sudden appearance is a bother to them. Idol giggles, warmly assuring him that his presence is not a bother at all. She notes that the Majesty has been ordering far too many sweets lately, likely because he wanted an excuse to share them. The siblings and attendants bow their heads, thanking the king for his unexpected generosity and kindness. Lady Miltia smiles, prompting Rob Elm and Lindy to properly thank their older brother for the visit. Orcius clears his throat, looking slightly embarrassed by the formal attention from his younger siblings. He tells them with a small smile that from now on, they are officially permitted to call him Big Brother. The two children burst into a joyful shout of, "Thank you, Big Brother," their volume startling everyone. As they walk away, the siblings continue to chatter happily, their spirits finally lifted. Idol watches them, noting how happy they seem and expressing relief that Lindy has regained her energy. She turns back to find Lord Orcius looking at her with a strangely soft and pensive expression. Orcius jokes that he must be quite a tolerant husband to allow such a noisy family dynamic. As they walk further into the palace grounds, Orcius points out that the noble prison is just up ahead. Idle stops in her tracks, her thoughts drifting back to the man who saved her life, Lord Yawen. Recovering from non-fatal wounds, Sir Yawen learns he will soon be transferred back to Zeals if his condition remains stable. King Orcius approaches his wife with a conflicted heart, ultimately offering her the chance to meet with the injured Yawen one last time. Orcius confesses his selfish desire to keep them apart, warning that once Yawen returns to Zeals, they will never cross paths again. Torn by the fear of her relationship being misunderstood, the queen hesitates before deciding that she must face this final meeting. Steeling her resolve, she prepares herself for what she knows will be the definitive end of their shared history. Orcius questions her decision with a piercing gaze, his skepticism lingering as they prepare to visit the prisoner. The queen reflects on Yawen's secret confession of long-held feelings, a truth he shared only when they were completely alone. A hand reaches out to comfort her as a voice asks what she is truly afraid of in this moment of confrontation. Vowing to stay by his side without blame, Orcius reassures her that being together now is all that matters for their future. The narrative shifts as the final chapter begins, marking the transition into the aftermath of their long struggle. A silent moment hangs in the air as the heavy doors to the infirmary are approached. The door creaks open to reveal Sir Yawen sitting upright in his bed, his body still heavily wrapped in bandages. Yawen looks up in shock, his eyes widening as the unexpected visitors enter his room. Seeing the woman he loves, Yawen instinctively calls out to her as Princess Idle. His breath hitches in surprise and disbelief at the sight of the royal couple standing before him. King Orcius immediately corrects him with cold authority, demanding he address Idle as the queen and his wife. Maintaining a stern boundary, Orcius reminds the criminal that while he allowed this visit, he has no intention of letting them be truly alone. Idle acknowledges the situation with a heavy heart, gazing at the man who was once her protector. Softening her expression, Idle tells Yawen it has been a long time and expresses her genuine relief that his wounds have healed. Yawen humbly thanks her, noting that he was fortunate to receive such excellent medical care despite his status. Idle brings up the news of his impending departure from Ostrom, her voice trailing off into a somber silence. Yawen looks away and confirms that he can no longer remain in the kingdom after everything that has transpired. With painful honesty, Idle apologizes and firmly tells Sir Yawen that she cannot return his romantic feelings. A heavy silence falls between them as the weight of her rejection sinks in. Idle recalls her early days of constant anxiety, having arrived in Ostrom as a stranger through a mere political marriage. She explains how Lord Orcius's sincere efforts to know her made her want to learn more about him in return. The queen fondly remembers the kindness shown to her by the queen mother, the princes, and the entire knightly order. Looking back at her husband, she realizes the people are kind to her specifically because Orcius is a respected king. She declares her wish for the Western nations to know the true depth of Ostrom and vows to walk forever by the king's side. With a radiant and certain smile, she informs Yawen that she is now truly happy. Yawen stares at her, stunned by the visible transformation and the strength radiating from her presence. He processes the finality of her words, seeing the queen she has truly become. Recognizing her growth, Yawen remarks that Her Majesty has become much stronger than the princess he once knew. Idle thanks him, crediting her current life to the fact that he saved her back in Zeals. Turning to King Orcius, Yawen offers his deepest gratitude for the king's unexpected generosity and mercy. He reflects internally on his desperate attachment, realizing it is finally time to let go of his obsession. Offering a final blessing, Yawen wishes Queen Idle continued health and well-being as they part ways forever. The heavy doors swing shut with a definitive click, signaling the end of Yawen's role in their lives. Yawen sits in the ensuing silence, a single tear escaping as he finally finds peace in her happiness. Sometime later, court officials report that negotiations with Zeals have settled, allowing the kingdom to focus on domestic peace. The knights tease the king, noting that he lately seems unable to bear even a moment away from Lady Idle. Orcius coughs in embarrassment, becoming living proof that a political marriage can indeed evolve into true love. His advisors playfully remind him of how he once claimed he never dreamed of such a successful political union. As a full year passes since Idle's arrival, Orcius tells his friend to find his own love rather than pestering the happy couple. The light-hearted atmosphere is interrupted by a sudden, urgent knock at the door as an attendant seeks the king. The advisors look on with curiosity as Orpheus gives the permission to enter. An elderly court lady enters the room with a solemn and respectful bow. She requests a private audience to inform the king of a secret matter regarding Lady Idol's current condition. Both the king and queen are struck with visible shock as the official delivers the life-changing news. The lady explains that while they must wait for fetal movement to be certain, the likelihood of pregnancy is very high. With a look of intense realization, the dark-haired king absorbs the news of the pregnancy while his queen stares off with a dazed expression. Standing amidst the clinical atmosphere of the room, the doctor prepares to depart after delivering the life-changing revelation. The physician offers practical advice, warning that morning sickness will soon begin and urging the queen to prioritize eating whatever she can manage. A heavy silence fills the chamber as the door clicks shut, leaving the royal couple alone with their shock. Idol remains in a state of complete disbelief, her wide eyes reflecting the sheer magnitude of the fact that she is carrying a child. Clinging to the reality of the moment, she wonders if it can truly be real that a new life now exists within her. The king reaches out a gloved hand in a slow, deliberate motion toward his wife. Gently placing his hand over her womb, the king tenderly declares that their child has chosen them and has finally settled within her. Tears begin to well in Idol's eyes as the weight of his words and the warmth of his touch break through her stunned silence. Panicking at her sudden emotional outburst, the king frantically asks if he caused her discomfort by touching her belly. Blushing deeply through her tears, Idol touches her own stomach and marvels at the fact that a child belonging to both of them is truly inside her. She weeps openly, overwhelmed by the intensity of her joy and questioning if such profound happiness is actually allowed. Pulling her close, the king reassures her that this is only the beginning and promises that she will become even happier from this day forward. He vows that they will raise their child together with the utmost care and devotion. A soft, ethereal light bathes the scene as the narrative shifts into a peaceful, dreamlike state. Nature itself seems to celebrate the news, with flowers blooming and a blessed breeze carrying the melody of spring toward the unborn child. In a vision of the future, Idol imagines her child growing up healthy and strong, running and playing freely with the wind. A soft voice calls out to Idol, gently pulling her back from the depths of her slumber. Her eyes snap open in a flash of white light as she suddenly returns to the waking world. Emerging from her nap, Idol finds her husband leaning in close with a look of concern, asking if she is finally awake. Disoriented and blinking against the light, she breathlessly addresses him as Her Majesty while trying to find her bearings. The king smiles warmly, explaining that she fell asleep due to the exhaustion of her pregnancy and urging her to continue resting. Idol realizes with a blush that she had fallen asleep right on the king's lap while he watched over her in the sunlit room. He notices her hesitation and asks what is on her mind as she struggles to find the right words. The king playfully tells her that watching her sleep is a special privilege reserved for him alone. He confirms that she looked incredibly peaceful during her nap, even as she insists she has slept more than enough. Idol reflects on the vivid dream she just experienced, realizing it felt more like a memory than a mere fantasy. She describes hearing a gentle, familiar voice singing a soothing lullaby within the dream. Though the lyrics have faded, she expresses a deep desire to sing that same melody to her own child one day. The king suggests with a soft expression that the voice she heard in her sleep may have been that of her own mother. Musical notes drift through the air as the memory of the lullaby lingers in the quiet of the palace. Their hands remain intertwined, symbolizing the unbreakable bond between the two as they face the future together. The king continues to sit by her side, the peaceful atmosphere of the room punctuated only by the silent melody of her dream. Later, a young girl named Lindy rushes in with a bright smile, enthusiastically asking if her big sister is feeling better. Idol greets Lindy with a warm, relieved smile, thanking her for coming to visit during her recovery. She looks up in surprise as she notices the room is busy with preparations and familiar faces. It is explained that Lady Miltia and the king have already headed to the temple to hear the archbishop's address. Her attendants remain vigilant, urging Idol to report any discomfort immediately while she insists she feels fine today. Despite the king's previous warnings to rest if she felt tired, Idol remains determined to fulfill her royal duties. Her companions remark with a laugh how much the king's personality has shifted since the news of the pregnancy broke. The scene transitions to the grand architecture of the temple, where the bells toll for the gathered crowd. Inside the cathedral's massive, ornate hall, a sense of holy anticipation hangs over the congregation. The royal family sits in prayerful silence among the citizens, including Lady Miltia and the young soldiers in attendance. Suddenly, the quiet is shattered by an explosion of applause and cheers echoing through the high rafters. From the pulpit, the announcement is made to officially congratulate Queen Idelcia on her pregnancy. Idol looks on in stunned silence as the king gives a confident, knowing smile beside her. The vastness of the temple emphasizes the public scale of the joy shared by the entire kingdom. Feeling the physical toll of the event, Idol closes her eyes and exhales a long breath to steady herself. Noticing her fatigue, the king leans in and softly suggests she step away from the crowd to find a quiet place to rest. Lady Miltia reinforces his concern, tenderly reminding Idol not to overexert herself for the sake of the child in her womb. Feeling a bit overwhelmed by the attention, the young man accepts the kindness offered despite not being used to being pampered. Looking flustered as he calls out for his mother, Ortiz is urged to rest for the sake of his unborn child while the king worries over him. A young girl named Lindy excitedly declares she is coming along while being playfully pursued by her family. The queen walks gracefully down a stone path accompanied by her loyal guard. Closing her eyes, the queen finds a moment of stillness as a faint melody begins to drift through the air. Her eyes snap open in sudden realization as the familiar notes of a song catch her attention. Distracted by the music, the queen pauses in confusion and wonders where His Majesty is going as the song continues to play. She stands frozen in the light, completely captivated by the hauntingly familiar tune. A vision of a pregnant woman sitting peacefully on a park bench appears, humming a gentle melody. The woman sings of birds, swaying greenery, and the melody of spring, wishing for a blessed breeze to fall upon her beautiful child. Continuing the lullaby, she prays for her child to grow up healthy and play among the wind and sun while sleeping peacefully in her arms. Startled out of her reverie, the queen apologizes for disturbing the pregnant woman who has just stopped singing. The woman explains that the song is a lullaby passed down through her family for generations. Though hesitant at first, the woman reassures the queen that it is all right to ask about the song. She reveals that her grandmother's homeland is Zeals, a place where the song is widely known. Singing the lullaby to her unborn child brings her heart ease, connecting her to the traditions of Zeals. The guard gently reminds the queen that she shouldn't remain standing for too long, causing the woman to realize her high status in shock. Bowing deeply in apology for her previous familiarity, the woman is told it's all right as the guard prepares to lead the queen away. Before they can depart, the woman desperately calls out for the queen to wait, claiming she has a request. The scene shifts to the imposing stone architecture of the palace. Ortiz approaches a set of large doors, his attention caught by a soft sound from within. Opening the door, Ortiz finds the queen humming the same lullaby he heard earlier. He watches her intently, eventually asking if the song she is humming is a lullaby. The queen smiles warmly at Ortiz and tells him that the woman she met earlier that day taught it to her. Ortiz realizes she met the woman today, and she confirms that the person was singing it when they crossed paths. She explains that the song from her dream is a Zeals lullaby that tells a child that spring is coming. When Ortiz asks if there are songs for other seasons, the queen realizes she can't remember the rest of the lyrics. She smiles softly, suggesting she might feel so connected to this specific song because she was born in spring. To her surprise, Ortiz suddenly sweeps her up into his arms with a tender smile. He acknowledges her spring birth with a gentle look in his eyes. Chuckling at her reaction, Ortiz notes that she has gotten a little heavier due to the baby in her belly. Holding her close by the window, he remarks that he has started to feel spring approaching even here in Ostrom. The queen agrees with his sentiment before softly asking if he misses his mother. Startled by the question, she listens as Ortiz says he can imagine her mother singing to her. He admits he once asked Lady Barnett about her mother's whereabouts and offers to search for her with everything he has. Touching her stomach, the queen says she has already received so much here and is most looking forward to meeting their child. Her greatest hope is to celebrate the child's birth, a wish that Ortiz quietly acknowledges and understands. Ortiz leans in close, promising that before they celebrate the baby, he wants to celebrate her birthday. Several months pass as the season changes. The quiet of the room is broken by the soft, small cries of a newborn. The queen gently soothes little Fortis, wondering what is wrong as the infant continues to fuss. She reaches down to comfort the baby lying in the cradle. Watching them together, she notes with a smile that the baby looks exactly like his father. Ortiz looks up from his book, slightly embarrassed, and argues that he isn't that pleasant-mannered. The queen insists that while the baby has his eyes, she can see Ortiz's blue in them as well. Ortiz offers to hold the child since the queen was in the middle of her embroidery. He asks if she is finishing the extra baby clothes, but she reveals she hasn't finished them yet. Surprised, he asks if the item she is working on is actually for him. She smiles, explaining she is embroidering the royal crest onto his sword belt because he was looking at Fortis with envy. Ortiz is left speechless as she bashfully warns him not to expect too much since her stitches are a little clumsy. King Ortiz addresses Idol softly as they share a quiet moment, signaling the start of an intimate exchange between the royal couple. Their peace is suddenly shattered by the loud, piercing wail of baby Fortis, catching both parents completely off guard. The frantic infant continues to cry out, demanding the immediate attention of his flustered mother and father. Ortiz stares at the child with a mix of shock and concern while Idol attempts to soothe the restless prince. As summer draws to a close, Idol lightheartedly predicts that the coming winter will be quite noisy with the new addition to their family. The scene shifts to Lady Widia, who is visibly agitated as her servant timidly reminds her of her contradictory statements from the previous day. Exploding in a fit of rage, Widia screams that she detests her dress and accuses the help of eavesdropping on her private business. Widia's temper reaches a boiling point as she hurls insults at the staff, calling them trash and ordering them to get out of her sight immediately. Outside the room, the servants whisper about Widia's unbearable personality, noting that her future husband is destined for a miserable life despite their high-status marriage. Trembling with silent fury, Widia vows she will never forgive Idol for the life she has been forced into. A flashback reveals a younger Widia questioning a girl if she is the sister their mother had mentioned. The young Idol stares back with wide, innocent eyes, unaware of the deep-seated resentment brewing in her sibling. To Idol's surprise, Widia smiles and expresses genuine happiness at finally having a sister to join her. Widia gazes at the kind-hearted Idol, marveling at her gentle nature during their first real meeting. Claiming her brother is too arrogant, Widia encourages Idol to call her Big Sister and admits she always wished for a female companion. Hesitantly, Idol speaks the words, Big Sister, for the first time, cementing a bond that would later turn to bitter rivalry. Widia beams with a radiant, seemingly warm smile as she asks Idol to get along well with her from that day forward. Two birds sit together on a barren branch, a quiet visual metaphor for the fragile peace between the sisters. The narrative returns to the present as the palace reflects the quiet before the next storm. Idol is pulled from her memories by the soft, repetitive sounds of her waking child. Looking out from her balcony while holding Fortis, Idol reflects on the weight of her past and her current royal responsibilities. She greets the morning with a gentle smile, noting that Fortis has slept exceptionally well through the night. Idol finds herself lost in thought again, questioning the true nature of the big sister Widia used to be. Her loyal attendants arrive to assist her, announcing they are ready to help Her Majesty prepare for the day's events. While walking through the grand, arched corridors of the palace, Idol asks if the king has already arrived for the ceremony. The staff confirms that Ortiz has returned safely from his campaign and is heading directly to the celebratory banquet. A wave of relief and joy washes over Idol as she anticipates reuniting with her husband. The attendants remark on her obvious worry, noting that the couple has been separated for 15 long days. Idol catches sight of Ortiz in the distance, her eyes lighting up at the first glimpse of him after his long absence. Ortiz stands tall and composed, offering a warm and knowing gaze to his approaching queen. Approaching her with a smile, Ortiz greets Idol and immediately compliments her timeless beauty. Fortis lets out a small cry as Idol expresses her profound gratitude that the king has returned to them without harm. The royal family gathers happily as Lady Barnet chuckles, noting that baby Fortis seems to have grown in the blink of an eye. Overcome with emotion, Ortiz and Idol share a tender, private kiss to commemorate their reunion. Despite the romantic atmosphere, Idol's first concern is whether her husband sustained any injuries during the campaign. An intentional, loud cough breaks the moment as an onlooker signals that the public setting is inappropriate for such intimacy. Lady Barnet apologizes for the interruption but reminds them that a formal reunion after such an absence requires proper decorum. She points out that foreign envoys and nobles are watching and urges the king not to be entirely absorbed in his own world. Ortiz concedes with a playful sigh, admitting there is never a room to truly relax under the watchful eyes of the court. The grand ballroom is filled with guests, all gathered to celebrate the king's victory and the birth of the young lord. The king's mother greets Ortiz warmly, expressing her immense relief at his safe return to the capital. Idol credits young Lindy for keeping her company during the king's absence, though the mother apologizes for the girl's constant presence in Idol's room. The conversation turns to Robelm, whose boundless energy has led him to sneak away from the castle and disappear into the city. Worried about his reckless behavior, Idol asks Ortiz if he could provide the young soldier with some much-needed advice. Idol looks on in disbelief as she learns that despite his best efforts, the palace servants always manage to catch Robelm immediately. Ortiz introduces Idol to Halbiash, the respected overseer of the Kamishina rock salt mine. Halbiash bows deeply, thanking the king for his decisive action in eliminating the bandits plaguing the region. Ortiz explains that his personal intervention was the quickest way to stop the bandits from selling Ostrom's precious resources on the black market. The overseer admits they never expected the king to handle the matter personally, but all the local merchants are profoundly grateful. Local residents and lords alike express their gratitude, noting that the increased security on the road to the northern Sea of Kleidos will lead to great prosperity. Reacting in horror, onlookers recount the grisly legend of victims found with stakes through their hearts and bodies pressed against walls. Reports of numerous women being murdered recently along the coast west of the Sea of Kleidos create a chilling atmosphere. The lack of a common link regarding the victims' ages or social status causes the public to grow suspicious of everyone, including merchants. Considering the ritualistic nature of the killings, one observer notes that the violence sounds suspiciously like devil worship. Staring into the distance, a man ponders the terrifying possibility of the killers slipping into the city of Ostrom. The populace expresses deep gratitude and shouts for joy, feeling fortunate to have a king who cares so much for his people. To ensure safety, the king vows to order his lords to strengthen security in the northern cities and dispatch knights if necessary. Standing firm in his resolve, the king assures his subjects that he will not allow any more victims to exist within his kingdom. A serious-looking man with glasses delivers an urgent message that has just arrived from the nation of Zeals. Idol is visibly stunned when she is told that the incoming message is actually from her father. The news that a message has come specifically from Zeals leaves Idol wide-eyed and reeling from the shock. The correspondence reveals that the cardinal of the Amadeus region will soon be sent to the country with an official delegation. Onlookers are amazed by this unprecedented event in Ostrom's history, questioning why such a high-ranking official from Amadeus is visiting. While Idol wonders if her father requested the visit, it is noted that Ostrom adopted the sacred faith about 200 years ago. The gravity of the situation is clear, as a cardinal from the prestigious Amadeus region is often a candidate to become the next holy emperor. Serving at the pinnacle of the faith, the cardinal is recognized as one of the closest aides to the holy emperor himself. A woman remarks that it is a tremendous honor and proof that Idol's father truly cherishes his daughter despite the difficult negotiations required. Idol softly agrees, though a look of internal conflict and sweat suggests she is deeply unsettled by this sudden show of affection. She expresses genuine surprise that her father would go to such lengths for her, as she had always viewed him as indifferent. Idol recalls her time of trouble in Zeals when her father was seemingly unable to do anything to help her. Reflecting on the past, Idol and her companion agree that the family dynamic was difficult in a very negative way. Despite never remembering receiving love from her father, Idol claims she does not bear him any hatred. She thoughtfully considers that being forced to act with such coldness must have been painful for her family members as well. Believing that hating people is a painful burden, Idol refuses to harbor ill will toward Queen Isoya or her half-sister. Her companion changes the subject to reveal that Idol's half-sister, Widia, was married last year in the city-state of Woolram. Looking directly at Idol, he confesses that there is one piece of news he has been keeping from her. Idol's eyes widen in surprise as she repeats the word sister, processing the news of the marriage. She takes a moment to absorb the fact that her sister has moved on to a new life through marriage. He explains that he deliberately hid the news because Widia's husband, Kurt, was someone who had previously mistreated Idol. Despite the history of mistreatment, Idol offers a kind smile and sincerely hopes that her sister finds happiness. Her companion returns her kindness with a soft, knowing smile as they share a quiet moment together. Idol is momentarily confused when the topic suddenly shifts to the idea of an inspection tour. With a charming gaze, he expresses his desire to walk through the city streets with her, just the two of them alone. He formally proposes that they go on an inspection tour of the city very soon. Idol worries about the potential uproar at the palace, but he assures her they will take minimal guards who will stay out of sight. He playfully mentions he heard from Gario that lovers go out alone together, causing Idol to blush intensely. Reminding her they have been husband and wife from the start, he asks if trying out that romantic feeling would be so bad. Idol is left speechless and flustered by his bold romantic overtures. As the scene shifts to the city architecture, Idol thinks to herself that she absolutely cannot tell Lindy about this secret outing. The pair makes their way into the bustling city to begin their clandestine inspection. Idol points excitedly at a stall selling sweets on a stick, which are made of honey and nut dough wrapped around a skewer. He asks if she would like to try it, but notices she seems distracted or surprised by something. Laughing, he admits that as a boy, he and Gario used to sneak out of the dormitory to enjoy the city like this. Idol realizes the depth of their secret as the sweet seller calls out to them, reinforcing that they truly cannot tell Lindy about their behavior. Surprised by his local knowledge, Idol remarks that Lord Orcius knows Lux City much better than someone who lived in a palace should. The peaceful atmosphere is suddenly interrupted as they both turn toward a loud disturbance nearby. A group of aggressive men harasses a local, shouting that he must pay what he owes immediately. One of the thugs rudely tells a woman to shut up, calling her an annoying old hag. The debt collector claims the whole neighborhood is sick of the victim, who has apparently been eating and drinking for free all month. Violence erupts as a man is kicked to the ground, while a shocked witness wonders if someone deliberately called the guard unit. The narrative begins with a sharp, intense close-up of a character's eyes, signaling a moment of high tension and focused intent. In a sudden burst of movement, a dark-haired man in a cloak delivers a powerful kick that sends an opponent sprawling to the ground while a bystander watches in shock. With a triumphant smirk, the dark-haired man looms over his fallen foe, who can only gasp in disbelief at the sudden turn of events. The defeated man recoils in anger, shouting insults at the one he calls a scoundrel for the humiliating blow. The scene shifts as the man who was kicked is sent tumbling backward across the stone-paved street. A crowd begins to gather, their murmurs and shouts filling the air as they react to the swift display of combat. Lord Orcius stands tall and delivers a stern warning, telling his opponent never to draw a weapon needlessly when they lack the strength to back it up. A young woman with wide, startled eyes gazes up at Lord Orcius, her voice trembling as she calls out his name in a mix of awe and concern. Local townspeople approach with friendly enthusiasm, praising the young man's strength and mistaking the pair for a married couple while offering them lunch at their shop. Official guards arrive on the scene to take the troublemakers into custody, ordering the crowd to disperse while asking if anyone needs further assistance. Lord Orcius takes Idol by the hand and tells her they should leave, as the guards have the situation under control. The two walk briskly away through the city streets, leaving the commotion and the crowd of onlookers behind them. Orcius notes that their schedule has been disrupted and suggests they return to the palace alone together. Idol looks at him with a blush, agreeing to the suggestion as Orcius smiles and remarks that from this moment on, no one else will be with them. They share a tender, intimate moment, their faces close together as the world around them seems to fade away. Holding hands, the pair runs through the picturesque city streets toward their destination. The grand, arched gates of the palace loom ahead, marking the transition from the public streets to the royal grounds. Back at the palace, a man named Vias is thanked for his diligent correspondence with Cardinal Marat over the past few months. Vias humbly accepts the praise, admitting he was nervous but considers the task a great honor. The discussion turns to the imminent arrival of the Amadeus delegation and Cardinal Marat, which is only a few days away. The atmosphere shifts abruptly when a courier arrives with an urgent message for Vias, causing him to pause in serious contemplation. Vias delivers shocking news that the head of the delegation has been changed from Cardinal Marat to a man named Cardinal Herench. Adding to the tension, Vias reveals there is one more critical matter involving a report concerning Lady Idol. It is explained that Cardinal Herench is from the northern diocese of Odanius and his appointment was recommended by the Holy Emperor himself. A vision of the new cardinal and his entourage appears, showing a man of high standing arriving in a horse-drawn carriage. A finely dressed woman steps out of the carriage, her arrival signaling the start of a new and potentially difficult chapter. The woman reveals a sharp, confident expression as she prepares to face the royal court. Lord Orcius looks at Idol with concern, asking if she is truly comfortable with the situation unfolding before them. Information is revealed about the Verret family, a powerful merchant house from Woolrum, and their connection to Idol's half-sister. Idol resolves to meet them, declaring her intent to face her half-sister with the support of Orcius and those in the palace. A painful memory surfaces of Idol being told she was a mistake conceived with a maid and stayed in the palace only out of pity. Orcius and Idol stand together in the palace halls, preparing to receive their unexpected visitors. Kurt Verret and his wife Widia appear, bowing as they prepare to offer their formal greetings and apologies. Kurt humbly asks for forgiveness for the sudden visit and the oversight regarding the change in their correspondence. Formally introducing himself as the representative of the autonomous city of Woolrum, Kurt thanks the royals for their hospitality. Kurt introduces his wife, Widia, who expresses her gratitude for being granted permission to appear before the queen. Idol and Widia lock eyes, the air between them thick with unspoken history and tension. Idol asserts her new authority, greeting Widia not as a sibling, but as the Queen of Ostrom who no longer needs to run away. The queen formally welcomes the delegation, acknowledging the difficulty of their journey to the palace. Widia enthusiastically boasts about the rare treasures she has brought from Woolrum, a city where the world's riches gather. Orcius watches the exchange with a guarded expression, remaining silent as Idol handles the encounter. Idol commands the attendants to bring the items in at once, maintaining her royal composure. Orcius reflects on the strategic importance of Woolrum, noting its remarkable growth and the benefits of maintaining contact with them. Orcius pulls Idol aside, asking her privately if she was truly confident in her decision to face her past. He urges her to set aside matters of state for a moment and be honest with her own heart about her feelings. Idol reacts with a moment of surprise, her resolve momentarily challenged by his direct question. She explains that she has decided to stop running away and that her only wish is to stand by Orcius as his queen. Idol clarifies that her actions are not driven by mercy, but by a sense of duty and self-respect. Orcius admits that unlike Idol, he is not merciful and finds it difficult to forgive those who were cruel to her. Idol reflects on her past as a rejected outcast within her own family, yet she still hopes to find sincerity in their apology. Receiving a sudden request for a meeting from Widia scheduled for the following day, Idol reacts with visible shock. The mysterious figure imposes strict conditions for the audience, demanding that Apara guard the door while Lady Janishek remains present. Idol stares ahead with wide, trembling eyes as she is led away, her hand gripped firmly by her companion. Sensing her distress, her companion urges her to seek rest immediately to prepare for the long, taxing day ahead. With a soft, hesitant voice, Idol offers her gratitude for the support before retiring for the evening. From behind, her loyal attendants watch her depart while Lady Janishek whispers a stern warning for Idol to remain cautious. The narrative shifts to the following morning as the sun rises on the day of the fateful encounter. Idol begins her day by formally thanking Janishek and Obara for their unwavering protection. She reflects on the danger posed by Widia's mother, who lives in obscurity and likely harbors a deep desire for revenge. Though Idol admits to feeling a sense of dread about facing her past, she notes that even the king shares her concerns regarding the visit from Kurt and Widia Verret. Her mind drifts back to a haunting image of a smiling girl from her past. Despite her lingering fear, Idol resolves that everything will be fine because she is now surrounded by people who truly care for her. She identifies the girl from her dreams as none other than her own half-sister. The heavy doors draw back to reveal the visitors awaiting their audience in the grand hall. Widia greets her with a radiant, almost predatory smile, exclaiming that they have been waiting for Her Majesty Idol.